I'd like to officially call to order the Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. And as always, we will start with a roll call. I am Brian Barabee.
I am Jeffrey Bryan.
Emily Winter.
Kit McNamara.
Rebecca Wonfall.
Okay. Have a sheet for the meeting.
Yes.
Okay, first up, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now hold a public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider the notice of intent submitted by Chris McKenzie of Ducharme Millis on behalf of the property owner in regards to the proposed repair and upgrade of septic system located at 811 Main Street. Public meeting to begin this evening, right now. How are you?
Good evening, everyone. Chris McKenzie from Ducharme Millis.
Hi, Chris. Want a donut?
No, thank you. Not too many of you look familiar to me. I've worked at Whitman and Bingham and out of Leominster for the last 18 years. Had a few things in front of you guys, not many though. Just started at Ducharme Millis recently.
Really good?
No, thank you. And have you received a DEP number for this yet?
I did not. I checked it before I left my house. Apparently they haven't got our check yet.
Oh,
That's
interesting.
what the statement was.
Okay.
They didn't have any comments. It was listed on the website. There were no comments.
Okay.
But they hadn't issued the number, and it said not issued because they haven't got the check there, which is odd because it all goes out. The same day I dropped it off to you, everything went in the mail.
Right.
Yeah, so.
That's happened before.
Yeah,
That's
that happens.
delay.
So this is a proposal actually for existing house number 811 located here with a garage. Main Street's located out here. There's an existing driveway to access the house. The existing system located in this area here was inspected back in June and failed the Title V inspection. The house is vacant at the moment, and so the proposal is to install a new leach field located here, septic tank, and a new building sewer crossing the driveway, and then a line coming down to the system located here. 4 trenches, 35 feet long. The water table was somewhat high out here. I think it was in the 40s, 42, 48 inch range. So it's a fill system. These lines here represent the grading. We did have to put a little bit of retaining wall down at the base to keep the fill from being on the neighboring property. So you can see we've got a wetland on this side of the property. There's a wetland on this side of the property. Showed all the buffer zones, this being the 100 feet from the wetland or 75-foot AURA. You can see part of the system is located within that, and most of the grading is as well. There's an existing well. We're not exactly sure where it is. There's a pump inside the building somewhere. We suspect the well is located out here. It's part of the Board of Health approval is going to involve, figuring where that well is and removing it, as well as closing up the existing system.
Would you be installing a new well?
Yes, yeah, new wells being proposed in this location here will be outside the buffer zone. So we show an erosion control barrier around the whole system area, all the work area. Wouldn't be opposed to extending it into the house here. There will be some work in the driveways outside the buffer zone.
And what are you proposing for the erosion control zone?
We have a detail on the plan, the straw wall.
These two coming across, what do these represent? The offsets?
This is 100 feet from the wetland.
Yeah.
This is 50 feet. I show that
I
because
got
that's
you.
a state
Yeah,
offset requirement.
that's a
for the system.
25?
And that's your 25.
Okay,
56.
all right.
Yep.
And how far away from the structures do you have to be for Board of Health
How far from the structures for?
for the stuff for the leach field?
The septic tank has to be at least 10 feet. The leach area has to be at least 20. And it has to be at least 100 feet from the well.
Okay.
In case you're, I feel where you're coming from here. We did a test hole located here and a test hole located here. Those were not acceptable for the Board of Health requirements. We did 2 test holes down here. These were acceptable, and we also did a perk there.
Okay.
So that was the only area. we
I'm
found
just thinking of,
testing.
and I do appreciate that information. I'm just thinking of potential rotation of that system, so you're rotating
Well, you
or
gotta
is
stay
that-
within the test hole area.
Okay,
We have a bad test hole here,
right.
you know, you can't dig everywhere on the site, 'cause you don't want
No,
to
yep.
disturb all the soil. But these are our valid test holes, so we have to stay within those.
Okay, so just to explain, I'm not saying pull it out this way, but I don't know if you can rotate it, because then you're still within your valid test holes, but you're
What?
further away from the 50-foot buffer on this side.
Designing a system, you're supposed to run your trenches parallel with the slope.
Okay.
You see your existing grade 419 comes through just like that, and that's what these lines are doing.
Okay.
If we do that, what happens, we're gonna raise the system, because this is gonna come uphill.
Yep. So that
We
would
just
mean-
barely make gravity as it is.
And that would mean adding more fill?
More
versus
fill,
doing it-
more work in the buffer zone.
You just point to the property lines, please.
Yeah, the property line is located right here. I'm still getting used to the new company's layout of stuff. Well, the place I worked for before, these lines were these property lines are really dark. Stood out. Stand out next to them. Still getting used to it.
What's the property like that it abuts right here? I'm just saying, I know you have to do a retaining wall to cut along that backside.
Yeah, there's an existing house there.
Yeah.
The property's going downhill towards it beyond here, I
So-
can't really say. But this, Harvard Street is right here.
Okay,
So this is
all
the
right.
backyard of some of those lots.
Yeah.
This is, the church owns this property, the church is right
Yeah,
next to it.
yeah, sorry, so it's the house in the corner, this is the next one, I think.
Harvard Street, Harvard, across the street from.
Across the street
Yeah,
from you and then down one.
So this is towards us?
No.
Oh, I know where it is, I
Going-
know where it
going,
is,
yeah.
yeah, it's just, it's a lot of trees and this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why
yeah,
it's set
very
right
wooded.
now.
It's- it's all
Yeah,
wood.
Right.
You
would
just
not-
barely
didn't-
see down the driveway.
Right. So the church is basically right.
Yes, right. When you look down the driveway, all you can really
You see it.
see is the garage.
Right.
I just have a question about the erosion control at the base of that slope. Should we think that straw wattle is sufficient?
I would say
Pretty
silt
steep.
fence,
That's
yeah.
what I'm thinking, just like around this.
Some silt fence.
In addition to,
The house right now, 3-bedroom house,
Existing two-bedroom house.
2-bedroom, and that's the size of the system is for 2-3?
That's, Title V requires that we're asking for a couple of local upgrades and a local variance from the Board of Health. You cannot get these if you increase the flow.
Okay.
So this system is designed, it's sized for a 3-bedroom. This
Yep.
gets a little confusing because Title V requires minimum
It's the
sizing
minimum,
is
yeah.
3-bedroom.
Yep.
So you size it for a 3-bedroom, but the house can still only be a 2-bedroom.
But it's a 3-bedroom system, so
Right.
it's not
So it's really oversized for this house.
a. Right.
So if somebody buys it, are they gonna, would they add a bedroom to it? And it
That's up to the
still
Board of
be-
Health to
Yeah,
decide.
yeah,
that's
that's
not-
not.
But they're really not able to.
Yeah.
You'll have a tough time getting that past the Board of Health.
so since we don't have the DEP file number, which we would need to close anyways, would we want to schedule a site visit in the meantime?
It wouldn't hurt, if we need the DEP file number anyways,
Yeah.
I'd love to, just to see where it meets, because I'm just curious with the retaining wall, does it make sense to, no, it really doesn't, to cut the, rather than grading down into the buffer zone, if another retaining wall stops, but I know that it almost doesn't make sense, the wall can't, I know, it's.
Well, the Board of Health frowns on that because.
Yeah.
What this is doing is, there's a poly barrier located here.
Yeah.
And this slope is gonna be really steep, so that's why the wall has to be there, in addition to keeping the fill from going over there. They don't like these poly barriers, and they want it to be minimal.
I got you. Just wondering how that transitions to the
You
other
start
yard. where
to
there's
create a
retaining wall.
bathtub here.
Right.
Yeah.
You start
Yeah.
surrounding it with a poly barrier.
But it couldn't hurt, if we really need to kind of keep it open anyways, or we can close, but we really can't do much until we get a DEP number. Then if we had a chance next week to schedule it, it should be a quick visit, relatively, I would think, just to see what's going on there.
Amenable to that?
Site visit?
With that, where, I mean, that seemed to make sense. Like I said, we really can't close tonight anyways.
Sure.
Okay.
So, are you making contact for this property, so if we're scheduling a site visit, would I reach out to you?
Yeah,
Or is
yeah,
there?
absolutely. Yeah.
Alright. Send around a poll this week, because we'll see if any other site visits come up.
Yeah.
Alright, in that case, I'm gonna, unless there's any other questions right now ahead of time?
Yes, the request.
Would you mind?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for 811 Main Street until our next public meeting on Tuesday, October 16th?
Yeah, 14 days.
Yeah, 16th at, do we have times yet?
We can do 7:45.
7:45. We hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So continue.
Quick question, any idea when the sidewalk might be? Is it night, weekends, days?
Typically, what we've been doing is I will send a doodle poll, and then the commission gets back to me on when they're available. Typically, it's in the evening, although now we have to cut back our
It's a little
schedule there in
earlier,
the
that's
evening.
what-
So we'll see, but, typically it's during the week.
Okay.
Around 5 o'clock, we try to do it, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Only has Thursday and Friday this weekend.
Okay, and I'll, like I said, I'll check in with you
Yeah,
before we
okay.
confirm that, so.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good evening.
Jeff, do you have a second?
Second, yes, a second. A second, my second.
All right. The Bolton Conservation Commission will now hold a public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Button Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider the request for determination submitted by Bruce King regarding the tree removals located at 111 Coventry Wood Road. The public meeting to begin this evening. Yeah. Hi. How are you?
Wet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
Want it done?
No, thank you. We were just thinking,
Check
where you
your
going?
DSL.
You'll never see this again, it's just called dumping.
Yeah.
That's right, keep that.
Yeah, okay.
I'm gonna let you.
Oh, I was gonna say, if you wanna give us just a quick rundown again, and we have been out to the site quickly to take a look, but just a quick
Right.
rundown of what you're trying to do.
Basically, I'm looking to have 3 areas of trees removed. These are worksheets that I had that I was working with. Oops.
Did you go into one of the trees on his roof?
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, that one.
Mike, would you come in that?
So,
So basically, the small area of Mark 1, the tree that's down in the house. The area of Mark 2 is a stand of elms that unfortunately are starting to die and are already leaning over the house, and I'm concerned about them coming down. And the area Mark 3 is a large maple and a couple of smaller ones and some pines that are shading some of Sally's horticultural business gardens that have grown extremely over the last few years. Basically what we're
Look
looking
at
at.
it. We did go out on the site to have a look. Any questions? I'm just curious from.
I didn't have any questions.
Initial questions?
Trees that he said were coming down looked like they were gonna come down one way or the other.
Right.
Some were very obvious, yeah.
Better off to do the timing on your own, I suppose.
Yeah, I'd rather do it
Wait
on my
for it,
side.
yes.
Yeah, one of them already decided.
One of them already decided, yes.
Rebecca, did you have thoughts, questions?
I did not. It's pretty straightforward, and I think their requests seem reasonable. Some of the removal is within the front area, but again, there's trees, or their trees that are comparing, the lilies from, that they use for horticultural business.
Is it recognized horticultural business?
Yes, yep, they have included their business certificate, and along with that, because their home is built within, let me just see here. Basically the time period, that you would need to be exempt from the Riverfront Act, specific to any work really regarding minor alterations. They've provided their deed as well that supports that.
So, is anyone here tonight to comment on 111 Coventry? After hearing from Rebecca, any further questions, concerns? All right. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for 111 Coventry Wood Road.
Second?
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to make a motion that we, oh God. -5. See, you sure?
Oh man, are you sure? This is
You
every
sure you wanna
year.
do this?
Kids were
All
younger,
right.
because they would have loved that.
See?
last summer.
I'll bring my kids over. All right, I'd like to make a motion that we have a -5 determination for the request for determination of applicability for 111 Coventry Wood Road. That the area described in the request is subject to protection, and there meets the requirements for the following exemption as specified in the Act and regulations. The building permit is on file prior to 10/1/1996.
Yeah, that's right. And there is.
Yeah, and the definitions of agriculture under B, 5B and C, that meets the exemptions under those, and that the work described is limited in scope enough for approval. All right. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The signature page is also.
Marked. Say that in Mark's.
They're formatting problem.
What?
Do you have a second?
No, I moved it. I shared the second, right?
Oh, okay.
Give everybody a chance.
So I will have a copy of this ready for you tomorrow morning for pickup. I can either mail it to you or you can come in and pick it up. Whichever works for you. Okay, that's fine.
As they,
With tree removal.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
as they say, chop chop,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Everybody all set?
Yes,
You're all
you
set.
are.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to roll for this. Wait a minute.
Never.
No, never.
Don't
Good
kid
night.
yourselves.
Yeah. You guys take care.
Thank you.
We have 10 minutes.
What's that?
Oh, wow. So the typo on other business standing contract 4 is supposed to include the 5-Shire entryway project, which we've drafted the standard contract and issued it to the contractor, and we're just waiting for it back, and then we're starting work as soon as we get that information, and they pull the building permit. So we can do comments. Does anybody have immediate thoughts about the Still River Commons 40B project that they'd like me to include? Again, it still has to be filed with Concom. It has not been filed with Concom yet, but ZBA has requested comments from us. I've sent some initial thoughts after my review in terms of some resource areas that need to be confirmed, but I didn't know if you all had had the chance to look at the documents I forwarded, or if you needed anything added, or would like to mention anything sooner than later.
I've been holding sick for the last 2 days. I appreciate the documents you sent along. I need to spend a little more time with them.
That's totally fine as well.
As far as any more comments I might have, But it was interesting going out there, see what was going on again. But I
Yes,
will
how's
try
the
to
session
present
go?
it had fine, I had to leave a little early, but you had a chance to, it was a lot of what you could see before, but to go out and stay to the end.
Okay.
And what time with the other board, I thought was fine.
And did a wetland scientist or wetland specialist go out?
I don't think so.
No, right.
Who was there?
It was the applicant, Mr. Pace, and Brady Duchamp.
Auger test when you were out there? No, just walk the property for Still River? For Still River?
Yeah.
The parcel, did you do any augering or no? During the site
Saturday.
visit?
No.
Okay, great.
But it hasn't come before us yet, so.
No, it hasn't,
It has
and they're
not.
just asking for initial comment, so we're not opening any sort of public hearing on it, it's just initial thoughts, because they've requested the comments.
You and somebody else did.
We had when we did the original file on conservation.
I think you're
You
right.
what?
We had done auguring like.
Yes,
Mm,
yep.
Yeah.
It's going to sit up high, that's my one thought from it. It seems like there's gonna be the retaining wall, six-foot retaining wall, I think, and then everything's gonna be constructed on top of that.
Yep.
So it'll look high from the road, that's all.
Alright, so if you want, you can email me, you can come up with other thoughts
Yeah, I know. I
inquiries,
definitely-
questions are welcome as well, and I just forward them to the ZBA, and the town planner so that they have them and can start addressing those as needed.
People have a chance to look through the minutes from last week, wow, last meeting.
Yeah.
If so, were there any questions, changes, updates?
This 7:30, was that?
It looks like it got.
It is brand,
Huh?
oh, on that?
On this. Yeah, so this was the fellow that came in that was talking about
That was the multiple
7:30.
lots.
multiple, yeah.
The existing house, upgrading the driveway and then putting 3 new houses
Three
on
new
it with
houses.
the
Yeah,
berm
One of
to
them
top
was,
the hill.
one of them was gonna
In
be
the
in the buffer
zone,
zone.
yes.
So, we haven't done anything with that, right?
He's coming back tonight
He's coming
at
back tonight.
7:45.
No.
Yeah, so that's the one,
Right, that's the
Yeah.
one that we're talking about.
yeah. That's the one
I
where
wonder
we're,
if there's flooding today.
there it is.
Oh, significant.
Huh? Oh, no, how big the puddles are today. Does it seem like there's been a lot more rain? I know this is off
Pretty wet
topic.
the last month.
Yeah, a lot of the contractors that have come in have also made that same comment,
Yeah, because we were out somewhere, where there was all mud.
that we're gonna be talking about that.
Yeah, I know, but there was a lot of mud there too.
There's
There's
not.
mud everywhere.
It's in my car now.
It's season.
Yeah.
It's also in my car and
Yeah.
on my door somehow, I don't know.
It's because I throw it at your car.
I think it's a lot of.
Well, it was
stuff
on
I
the
did.
inside,
A lot of
I would
it,
have
I
taken
open it.
talent.
a lot of it on my dog too.
Like
And it ends up in the house.
Mhm. It is that season.
I have a general question. reserve area for septic systems,
Yes.
at what point does that kick in?
Reserve areas.
Like I've heard you guys talk about septic systems and saying this is where the field's going to
Yeah.
be, but I haven't heard the verbiage reserve area.
Sure.
And I was doing some work at some point when somebody's septic system failed and, well, all they talked about was where's the reserve area.
Right. So when, like, this evening, that will most likely be a question we'll ask at the next meeting, because we haven't been out on site yet in terms of locating where the actual site will be. So once we locate where the septic will be going and I think see the site in person, it sort of put things into perspective, and at that point, we'll ask any other outstanding questions, that possibly being one of them. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I mean, of course, I'm interested in it with regard to Century Mill.
Yeah.
But just in general, I mean, does every septic design have a reserve area?
I think it's coming to play, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not so much a new law, but 10 years ago, or at some point in time, a law was instituted saying that people, when you're designing a septic system, you need to design the reserve area in case the system fails, there's another area that you can tap.
Right.
And I'm not sure when that came into being.
I'm not positive.
But there are a number of houses in town that were built before that.
Right.
And then when they upgrade, if they upgrade and fix septic now, and Brandon, you might know this, I think now if you fix an old system, you have to, again, provide the backup field as well. But I think that's all new law relative.
So it's fair to say any new house would have to have a dedicated reserve area.
I would tend to think so.
Correct, I believe, yeah.
State environmental code requires that you have a reserve area. So whenever you design a new system, you have to have a reserve.
Okay.
So it's only usually in a repair situation that you can go through, you can file and just do an upgrade. So, but it's been 30 plus years.
How many?
30.
30?
Yeah,
30.
30 plus.
Yeah, even longer.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Minutes?
So, any questions on those minutes?
No.
Opposition? All right. I would like to make a motion that we approve and accept the minutes for our September 28, 2018 meeting as submitted, as drafted and submitted.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, we have minutes. All right, so
I did, since you've already
we
been
have
talking.
we have a lovely sheet for them.
Which one are you doing?
Start whichever one.
15, 18. Oh,
18 first. Okay, this is.
Are they separate?
They,
They are separate.
That's separate.
So we separate basically, so let's
We
just say this one
advertise.
sells first, and they build it there, and close it out, and not be tied to another.
I'm waiting for the other minutes.
gonna make a new sheet.
I got you.
What they do with the fireplace?
I don't know.
I thought
I
you
should have
were.
gone and taken
Yeah,
those
you
bricks when I had
There,
the
that's
chance.
it. So which were we doing first, I'm sorry?
18.
18?
Start with 18.
All right, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing under provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent submitted by Seth Donahoe of Ducharme Dillis regarding the proposed buffer zone grading on Lot 18, Moderator Way of Keys Farm subdivision. The public being to be continued right now.
All right, we filed a notice of intent, as described at the previous meeting. This is lot 18, which is a frontage lot on Hudson Road, but it is part of the Keys Farm subdivision, which was a farm open space phosphoric subdivision. It's a single lot, basically. We got the house in the back, there's two wetlands up in the front here with the corresponding 100-foot buffer zones. And we're basically threading the driveway in between those two buffer zones, but a little bit of the grading goes into the buffer zone.
Are you proposing to remove some of the guardrail that's there?
Yeah, they're gonna have to peel that back a little
Okay,
bit.
I was just double checking, because when we did do a site visit, we were losing light very quickly though, and we obviously found the area where you've removed the trees because it's outside the buffer area, or the property owner is, but I was just a little confused about the guardrail, but if you're gonna have to bend it back. then-
Yeah, so this is basically, that's the end of the guardrail right there, so they're basically, they'll
Right,
bring
okay.
that right back, yeah. obviously, once they bring the fill in for the driveway, it'll kind of negate the reason for the guardrail anyway.
Curious if others had questions, just going on the side, it looked like, you thread the driveway right through the two areas where the buffer zones meet up, which I appreciate, and it was basically just the grading coming off that driveway, which is going in to a minor extent. I didn't see a better place where they could have moved it, how they could have moved
I don't
it,
know what the
readjusted
grading
it. I don't know how you could really lessen that grading.
Tunnel
Unless,
bridge.
yeah, well, it's a bridge with walls, which I'm not really sure really helps for the area. I didn't have too many questions on this one, me personally, but I'm curious if anyone else.
It's pretty dark.
There was one question about sheet flow off the driveway, where that's being directed, will you have any, do you need any treatment areas or any sort of filtration basin in the base of that roadway?
No, not, it's a single family home, so
Okay.
really the only requirement by the town is not to shed it onto the road.
Right.
So basically, there's a low point, just as you come here, this is kind of, it's gonna be cut into the hillside, so everything will sheet flow down to the base here, and then it'll collect and make its way down. There's kind of a natural swale little area that goes down towards the wetland there.
Any other questions?
Where's the, trail in reaction to, so that, oh, okay.
That's the proposed.
That's the proposed,
Yeah.
that's what I mean.
And has
That's-
that been marked yet?
It is marked.
It is.
You can take a look, so.
So we marked the conservation boundary, property, and then we marked the trail as well.
Yeah, they're working on the bounds quite a bit there.
Yes.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
But they got out and they did the trail.
This doesn't have to trash it, does it, this lot?
No.
No,
I
that's.
think that's tied into the other order
Yeah,
conditions.
that's,
but yeah.
I'm just curious that, I saw where it was just,
Yeah. So they're actually gonna use that access way that comes in here for off-street parking.
Yeah,
The parking
yeah,
there, so they're
right.
gonna clean that
I'm
up.
just
and do that.
trying to figure out.
Do you know if there's going to be any other lots that will be filed with Concom for grading or anything?
I think just one more, which is, it looks like lot 8, the septic system.
Thoughts, questions? Anybody here tonight to comment on this particular project?
There you go, you answered your question before, it's right there.
What's that?
What's the reserve? There it is, right there.
That's the reserve area.
There it is.
Which again is outside the buffer zone. All right. Like to, and we do have DEP file number for this and everything, right?
Yeah, that's strange, huh?
DEP file number is 669, and there were no.
So the reserve scrap, I mean, the prime is scrap.
Yeah.
So this is basically that in there.
Yeah.
So,
So to be honest, I mean, these are raised systems, that's why
What?
these are raised
Yeah,
systems,
oh, yeah.
because of the high groundwater out there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
So in actuality, if this ever failed, they're gonna take that out and just rebuild it.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, right, just go remove that back there and should it.
what's the
We still
possibility?
show it, so.
Oh, the big possibility it would never fail.
I hope so.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the probability of something like that failing? I'm just,
You know,
and
honestly.
this is off topic, I
Yeah, no, it really
apologize.
comes down to the operation and maintenance of the system,
Yeah,
you know, I mean, it's amazing, like a leaky toilet, put a system in,
really.
yeah. So, I mean, really, you wanna keep the field aerobic, so it's basically designed so you get flow on it, then it dries out, you get flow, it dries out, so like when you've got a leaky plumbing fixture or something like that,
Or maybe a lot of rain.
it's just always flowing, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Water softeners,
Water softeners,
yeah, if you have hard water, which a lot of us do.
that will destroy it. Really.
You're not supposed to, have a lot of homes still have the tied to the septic.
Yeah, well,
They have tied to the septic,
yeah.
they're supposed to have a separate dry well, but, you know, that'll cause premature failure, but.
Great, all right. Information that we close the hearing for lot 18 Moderator Way.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Make a motion that we issue an order of conditions for lot 18 Moderator Way as currently drafted and submitted.
With the special conditions on the local bylaw.
with the special conditions under the local bylaw. As drafted and submitted. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Want to clip all those together?
Sure.
That's the top one, that's back.
Oh,
That's it.
A lot of dirt out there.
so,
A lot of dirt.
for a lot, we went out and we looked, and, I was communicating with you while we were on the site visit.
Yep.
There was a substantial amount of water, both flowing and stagnant on the site, so that's a concern for me, specifically on the side where lot 13 is, where the
Yeah.
silt fence was on the 100-foot buffer, which I understand that was geolocated there.
Yeah.
There was a substantial amount of water flowing through that silt fence, so my concern would be that A, migration of material doesn't occur with that water through the silt fence, and B, that due to the fact there's so much water there, you don't want it to be just relocating or dislocating the silt fence, or basically stirring it up so that you're no longer towed in at the base there.
Yeah.
Along with that, there was a substantial movement of water, but it was going through the swale that was temporarily placed there. The water was coming out clean, once it was coming under the roadway. But, so those were really my two concerns on site. And, you know, if that's resolved easily just by time of year, great, but is that something that's going to be affecting these structures long-term?
So, I guess, so obviously we've got a lot of rain in the last
Yes.
few weeks. And kind of, the last time I was out there, I noticed it was pretty wet down here. That's essentially why the detention ponds here, this is the low area.
Yeah, actually, hold that thought for a second.
Yeah.
The Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider the notice of intent submitted by Seth Donahoe of Ducharme and Dillers regarding the proposed buffer zone grading on Lot 13, Moderator Way of the Keys Farm subdivision. We continue the public hearing happening now. Sorry.
Oh, it's all right. So obviously now that all the trees have been cleared, and just given the material on site, and the amount of rain we've had, all of that sheet flow is coming down this pond, which it will do once it's all designed and constructed. Plus you'll be picking up, I mean, once the drainage system's in, I mean, all this road is kind of coming down this way anyway. I did talk to the site contractor who is basically, who's doing the stormwater pollution prevention plan, so they daily kind of walk these, and just told them, keep an eye on this situation, you know, if we need to start doubling hay bales up, but like you said, right now, the silt fence is doing its job, which is you want the water to be able to go through, so it's not, you know, if it backs up in real significant storms, that's when it has to blow through. So if it's getting through, it's good, but, you know, one thing we said, we want to get this berm in as soon as possible. And he said basically in the next 2 weeks, they're gonna start roughing that in. That'll have an impermeable core in it, and,
Having what?
impermeable core, just to kind of prevent that from kind of all blowing through. On some sites, you know, we'll kind of see how the basin is once you get it in there, because there is an overflow, and basically the way this is designed, this is a berm, and then there's a low point on the berm, which in the highest event, it'll overtop the berm. Otherwise, this is an outlet control structure, which is basically sized with openings for different storm events to release that runoff at a controlled rate. So, you know, if we need to, you know, before this is stabilized, but again, it's gonna be riprap, you know, we can put some hay bales and stuff in front of that control structure.
Is this where the rocks were? We walked across, we're out there. No,
No,
it looked like they,
riprap. I think
Yeah,
it was up
it's
there.
like
it was up here,
Or,
No, that one,
that one,
Right.
right there.
because
So
it was
that-
right where that temporary swale was
Yeah.
coming out.
Right, so that's just temporary, right?
Well,
There'll be a,
This is
The
permanent, so
riprap
there's
from
gonna
yeah,
be.
I know, but there was like a bunch of, they just.
I know
feel
they're laying
something.
pipe, I don't know if, was there any in the ground or,
The pipe was all laying on
it's on
Underground.
the side,
the,
okay.
on the side of the road, I mean, side up by near Hudson Road. But this was like they crushed up boulders or something and stuck them
Yeah,
on
it's
there
right
just to walk across.
I know they are crushing some of the rock on site,
Yeah.
just to be able to use it, so that might be what that is.
There's a lot of vehicles there.
So my concern would be, yes, I would like to, and I think, I'm not gonna speak for the commission, but I think it'd be beneficial if we do get that berm up sooner than later. However, my concern is that it's really wet out there. So, you know, it seems like it's a lot of clay in the soil, so it's not really going anywhere. You don't have that silt deposits that's migrating down the slope, but that would be my concern, and it sounds like you addressed that with the contractor, that he's gonna be keeping an eye on that, but.
Yeah, the other thing we do is, it really looks like it is, we can put a temporary basin up in here, to
Yeah.
kind of catch some of that sediment.
Was wet.
It's whatever, I mean, I
So
don't know if
we
you
got
guys
it.
noticed, they
Oh, yeah, we
basically
walked
had
all
to
the way up
put,
there.
they had to put a swale in, I mean, in the end, there'll be an interceptor trench there along this to
Right.
pick up that groundwater, but, you know, they can't even really get the road in, it's so wet. This, it's abnormally wet right now.
That's what you said, just
So
seasonal
it's-
groundwater, then
We've just got a lot of rain, and it
It's-
rains every week, and all these rain events are significant.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so
they're not-
the groundwater is basically up to essentially spring conditions, so, you know, they dug a trench all the way down here, and you can see it just come out of the side wall of that
Yeah.
trench.
Yeah.
And they basically have a temporary base that they're kind of constructing down here, just to be able to allow, they need the material here to be dry enough to be able to compact and roll that.
Yeah,
Essentially,
actually,
A mess.
so.
But for lot 13,
Yes,
Yeah.
we're talking back into the septic, grading down into the buffer zone, right?
yes, we've got some minor grading, goes about 15, 20 feet of the buffer zone there.
So are you proposing to obviously shift the silt fence that's there, because now you
Yes.
have to move that?
So in both locations, they're gonna have to shift it. Yeah.
My preference would be, and I can add that into the, order of conditions later, if the commission agrees with it, that it be altered in a way that there's a temporary fence put, so when you pull the other one, it's not washing through whatever it's catching.
Yeah.
Before they start work there.
Yeah, they could leave the silk fence up, just pull all the hay bales in. They're probably gonna do new hay bales, to be honest with you, just because, and as you guys see, they don't last
Yes.
Yeah.
too long. You gotta move them, they just fall apart.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Anybody in the audience tonight that can talk about lot 18, 13, on right away?
And will the new silt fence be geolocated as well, or is that at the
Yes.
discretion of
Yeah.
the contractor?
No, we'll survey look at
Okay.
that. They actually, they do all their own layout. So, we did all the initial stuff. They're a big enough company that we give them control.
Yep.
They have their own total station where they want, that they do all their layout with.
Who was the contractor?
Rhino Construction?
Like I said, on all the trucks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it was.
There's a lot of things. A lot of toys. Toys out there.
All right. If there's no other questions, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for lot 13 Moderator Way.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. I'd like to make a motion that we issue an order of conditions for lot 13 Moderator Way as currently drafted with additional conditions to be added as discussed regarding the shifting, and possible placement of temporary silt fencing.
Mhm.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's all yours.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So I will have that ready, both of them ready for you tomorrow.
All right, thank you very much.
Jeff seconded.
We did. Grab Century Mill, you're right.
Go all of them, or do it, are we split?
We have them split.
Okay, so we'll do it.
Right, yeah, I'm looking on time.
So it's 21 Century Mill Road first, and then lot 2, lot 3.
Should I just open them all at once, or
Well, that's up to the applicant.
I think that makes sense.
does it make sense? All right. The Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing and under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider the notice of intent submitted by Sam Labry of Goddard Consulting regarding the proposed construction of proposed improvements to existing driveway at 21 Century Mill Road. The Bolton Conservation Commission will also hold a public hearing, or will also continue the public hearing now under provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider the request for determination of applicability submitted by Sam Labry of Goddard Consulting regarding the proposed minor grading associated with construction of a single-family home located at Lot 2 Century Mill Road. The Bolton Conservation Commission will also now continue the public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider the notice of intent submitted by Sam Labry of Goddard Consulting regarding the proposed construction of a single-family home on Lot 3 Century Mill Road. And the Bolton Conservation Commission will now also continue the public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider the notice of intent submitted by Sam Labry of Goddard Consulting regarding the proposed construction of a single-family home on Lot 4 Century Mill Road. All these public meetings to be continued and heard this evening, beginning now. If you could introduce yourself quickly.
Scott Goddard, Goddard Consulting. That's a mouthful.
That was good.
I'm impressed. Alright, so I think probably the best way to do this is, there's lots happened since the last meeting, so I can try to bring you up to speed. I do have some revised plans for the lots to present to you tonight as well. So I'd like to start with the driveway itself, and that's what this plan is.
Okay.
So there was a updated submittal made to the planning board. And that was in response to comments from the planning board in their peer review with the drainage design. And in also integrating comments from the Conservation Commission. So the thrust of the modifications were, one, to sort of evaluate tree impacts, two, to consider to look at low impact methods for managing stormwater, and to be able to demonstrate with some calculations that stormwater was being mitigated in a way that's consistent with the Massachusetts stormwater standards, although the project is technically exempt from the Massachusetts stormwater standards because it's it's only 4 lots, and it's not subject to the Mass stormwater standards. Nevertheless, significant efforts have been made in order to demonstrate compliance with that. So the engineer has located all the significant trees within the proximity of the driveway, so you can see they're mostly all pines, and so it lists here with the sizes of the pines. That way we can quantify any trees to be removed. Secondly is the driveway in the original submitted design included a series of swales adjacent to the driveway, which would be, let's call it 5-6 feet wide, something like this, and require some tree removal and some slight earthwork and grading. The way the driveway sits right now, and as a reminder for those who haven't been out there, this is an existing driveway. So there's an active driveway that services out to this house. So this proposed driveway, which is here shaded, is exactly on top of that footprint. Okay. Now the driveway out there, in some sections it's 10 feet wide, other places it's kind of got shuffled driveway edges. It gets to make it to 12 feet wide. This is a clean 12-foot wide width, so it squares off. So let's call the current driveway but variable width between 10 and 12 feet. This puts it to a clean 12-foot width. What it also does, by paving it, it makes it so that you don't get that sloughing of gravel constantly with re-graveling and pushing it off. And the drainage design now has been significantly improved to basically have now 100% mitigation up to and including the 100-year storm event. So the method is utilizing pervious asphalt with a full reservoir below the pavement. So right now, when it rains, and we've had significant rains over the last all season. I mean, it's been a very, very unusually wet season in fall, and like I heard Brandon say in the last meeting, we're basically at springtime groundwater conditions, and that's been my observation as well, not on this site only, but in the region. That when it rains right now, it puddles either directly on the driveway, or whatever doesn't puddle on the driveway sheets off, and you get puddling adjacent to the driveway, particularly in the area within this purple zone here, here and here, which is the floodplain line. When we were out the site walk maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe something, you guys got the benefit of seeing the immediate peak flow condition after a 2-year storm event in the high groundwater condition, right? So I would say on a mean annual peak storm condition, you got to witness it live right when it was happening. Okay, and there's a benefit to that, because then you can see how the ground responds. So you saw some puddling here, you saw some puddling here. It didn't take very long for that water to subside. I went out there for a couple of days later. I took pictures here. In fact, I have one here showing that water subsided, quite quickly. This was taken on the 24th. This is my car parked here, looking right here. Okay, so that where we had 3 inches of water, something like that. In that zone, we now had no water just a few days later. So the water does infiltrate ultimately slowly.
Dated?
Data right now.
Wait, yeah.
It would be, I think what Brian's talking about is, just like when people contest, like we had a long time ago, not anything to do with the property, but we had someone contesting an intermittent versus perennial. We specifically asked that the photos be dated, just because it's clear, concise, there's no question on anything. So I think that's what Brian was asking.
Fair enough, and we can do that, but for now, at least I presented this to you, so I'll at least give it to you so you have it. But so that was on night 24th, that was a couple of days after our sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
So the impact of this now, the driveway is, I wouldn't hardly even call it an impact now, it's really a great improvement to the surrounding resource areas. It's out of the floodplain 100%. It is out of the riverfront area largely, except for this 78 square feet that's already within the existing driveway. So that's a very small impact. And the buffer zone work in total from the driveway is 809 new square feet. That's basically the shoulder edge along the driveway for the length of it within buffer zone. So we're not adding any impervious surface. Basically, we're taking a close to impervious surface, not quite, but I mean, it's not very pervious. The water sits on it, and we're making it pervious. So now when the water lands on it, it will immediately get to go into the reservoir underneath the driveway.
Yeah.
And do you foresee that having any implications or alterations to the current resource areas?
No.
The fact that it's not being able to flow over or sit on top or anything like that?
No, I mean, basically, it'll just continue to recharge the groundwater, on the site. And so instead of puddling on the surface, because the soils in this area are low permeability, you'll store it in the groundwater reservoir and allow it to continue to seep in. So basically, simply all we're doing is adding a paved but pervious stormwater basin underneath the driveway and improving the existing driveway. So that is it for that project. I've submitted these plans to you. They have, they do have X marks on there was a question about which pine trees might get impacted by roots. So the ones that are just right on the very edge, are labeled to come down. So the sizes and locations are on this plan with X's through those.
And just be clear, because I know it was brought up last time, so those are proposed now, the X pine trees are proposed to be removed in its entirety, not just
Correct.
altered roots and
Correct.
stuff?
Yeah, and that's why they're shown with an X, just to prevent them from, future impact. But this was the same plan that was submitted to the planning board with the same, they had the same question, which trees would come down as a result of that. So basically, you have to dig down, that 12 inches here of crushed stone with 2 inches of a bank run gravel below it, and then 3-inch filter course on top of it. So you end up with this 3-inch plus 12-inch, 15-inch plus 2-inch. So you end up with this 17-inch zone that's engineered. And so that means
That's the extent of that infiltration area or well
it's
reservoir
throughout the entirety.
And that's
So
gonna
it's-
make it better? I mean, throughout the entire
Right, it
thing,
makes
than
it-
what it is now?
It makes it so it acts as it's a stormwater management system. It's a BMP, so low impact development BMP.
Instead of
So
sheet flowing.
right now, there's no-
Swales on either side.
Right.
But-
Now
So,
it'll
but
just-
right now, you just said it was draining out after 2 days, right?
Right, but if these get developed, it cannot remain gravel, right? Is that the whole thing?
Yeah.
It has to
Correct.
be paved. So instead of doing an impervious paving system,
Oh,
and having
oh.
swales on either side and having a sheet flowing off, he's proposing this,
Oh, I
impervious.
understand, that's
So the
better
water will
explanation.
just,
And if you've ever seen them, it's wonderful. I mean, they want to work wonderfully. You can literally take a hose and you could stand on top of this and the water just soaks right in.
Do you trench it out?
Yes,
How does it?
you have to excavate out.
No, to maintain it though.
Oh, no, I was
Oh,
saying
you
to
were
put it, I was to
okay,
put it in,
that's
I'm trying to think, what's the?
To install it.
So we're trenching right down the.
You excavate it out and then you
Yeah.
replace it with the
Where are they gonna
design.
put the dirt when they excavate it out?
They'll either have to use it elsewhere on site, or if there's no use for it, they would have to truck it.
Why can't you just build it up? Why do you have to excavate first to just put it back in?
That may cause a dam, if I'm not
It's,
mistaken, regarding the floodplain, or is this raising enough that it's going to have
It's-
a similar effect?
I mean, it's out of the floodplain, right? We're not in the floodplain. So,
Right.
so there's no prohibition on bringing the grade up at all. So could the grade of the ground be elevated?
then you have to berm on either side, right? And you can't
You'd have
just
to-
have this be open
Right,
at
you'd
the
have
edge, cause it's just gravel, so now you're gonna have to berm up and create
Yeah,
these
yeah, I know, it has to go
berms on
down.
either side of the driveway, if you bring the whole driveway up.
And right now, it's very sort of meandering within the landscape. It seems to me that keeping it at grade is more consistent with the surrounding environment. But that's not to say that there's a prohibition to mound
soil
upslope.
type under the road?
It's, I mean, this is all C-class soils. So
C-class,
C-class means that it's not quick permeability, not like a gravel would be an A. B would be not quite as good as gravel. C
so
is,
if you have a storm like we had a couple days ago, would this just drain right out? So there'd be no puddles on the top of
that's right, it would fill.
store under the driveway, but it would not drain any quicker than it would drain today, right? Because of the C-type soil.
Right, so instead of it sitting on top of the
So the puddle would
driveway.
be underneath the driveway instead of on top of the
That's
driveway.
right.
Basically, yeah,
That's
right,
exactly right,
right.
that's exactly right.
Rather than,
And how do you maintain that? Does that tend to fill in with silt or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you're supposed to, once a year, under the common driveway maintenance agreement, once a year, it needs to be vacuum swept.
Needs to be what?
Vacuum swept. So you basically have a vacuum sweeper go across it, and you try to keep the fines out of it. Because typically after 5 to 10 years of non-maintenance, the fines will slowly plug the void spaces.
Fill up that reservoir area.
Not the reservoir area, but the void spaces.
Porosity
in-
of the road system itself.
Yeah, the way that they make the asphalt pervious is that in that top coat,
yeah.
they keep the particles a bit more coarse.
So you have weeds growing out of the top of the road.
No, yeah.
If you let it fill in with sand,
Yeah, I
I
was
mean,
gonna say,
I guess
yeah,
you
if you
could
let
do
it-
that, right? So that's how that works. So a stormwater report was submitted to this board. It was also submitted to the planning board and was reviewed by their peer review consultant.
I have to say earlier, you said we were out there, it was a 2-year storm event that we were out there afterwards?
I think it was about a 2-inch storm event.
2 inch, I'm sorry, I thought you said 2 year, and I was
Yeah.
trying to look for a definition of what a 2-year storm
So
event is.
So a 1-year storm event, is kind of in that 2.5 inch range.
Right,
around there.
right.
And that's depending on what radar system you check, that's roughly what we had on that storm. And then we had, less than a week before, maybe, it was almost exactly a week, wasn't it? We got another storm.
Yeah.
That was maybe not, it wasn't 2 inches, that was sub an inch, but it was intense.
Significant.
And then we've had drizzling, since then.
Yeah, so that makes more sense. So the mean annual peak storm event you think is about 2 inches?
It
So
is,
mean,
yeah, 2.5, kind of in that range.
Yeah.
So that's the driveway. Maybe, I don't know if maybe it might make sense to have any further discussion on that first before I can, go further into the lot details or.
Sure, are there erosion controls, anything proposed for when it gets trenched?
Yeah, I mean, there's an erosion control area shown
Yeah.
all the way along this edge here and all the way along this edge here.
And do we have a detail as to what that consists of?
Right here.
Perfect.
Straw wattle with state straw wattle. You're not gonna need much because you're basically digging down, so you're
Right.
making the hole.
Right, stockpiling as they dig out material. Are there stockpile locations?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, it wouldn't be hard to stockpile it here. This is all outside of any floodplain area and part of the proposed lot 3. Seems to make sense to do it in here. I don't have it called out as a stockpile area on there, but it'll be within the limit of work as approved by, if we conclude the lot 3 discussion. But that'll be the logical spot, within the confines of whatever approved limit of works is for lot 3. Could be a specified stockpile area.
Yeah, outside
I mean, you definitely can't be on this side, because you got the ECB right on the edge. That's all riverfront, you got on the riverfront area side here, floodplain area side here, wetland buffers side here. So it would need to be really on this side.
Or at the rear of lot 1?
Or what?
At the rear of lot 1?
Keep bringing it front of the way,
Yeah, I mean, that would be pretty disruptive.
I'm just looking
up
at
there.
other areas, I'm not saying that's where it's going to be, but
Right.
I'm just.
So this new gravel going in, right, is for that whole section. The existing section that's paved, is it gonna be paved all the way to the new pavement? Are we updating the old pavement to the
So the-
pervious?
So the pavement's only proposed
Yeah.
service up to here.
Yeah,
And this is proposed to maintain as gravel as it sits right now.
so it's gonna go paved, gravel, paved?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there's a paved pad up here. That's more or less outside.
Why is that not going the whole distance? What's got to do with?
Because you only need to service up to a certain point in order to provide access to each lot, you know, so not everybody wants to have, I suppose if this person wants to have this paved, they could come before you and make that request.
Right. Well, the only thing is, right, that, well, I guess it still services the home.
There's a slope right here.
Right.
So water that lands on this section of the driveway.
No, but I was just saying, for like a shared driveway, I thought it had to be paved, right?
Well, maybe this will answer the question though, are each of the lot drive, off of the common drive being paved as well, or are they consisting of gravel?
Yes, no, these ones here would be paved for these individual lots, and this would just maintain as existing.
Well, for a shared driveway, didn't we say it has to be paved?
As far as the planning board
Right.
requires the shared driveway to be within a commonly shared easement,
Okay.
that portion of it is paved, that constitutes the shared driveway. Once you get past the access to this house,
I see.
it's no longer shared, it's only accessed by the one lot.
So this is on their property, or is this on their property?
It's on this property, but it will go over an easement,
I gotcha.
and over an easement,
Yeah.
So.
I'm just
the-
giving you-
the
just
planning board does
yeah.
not require the pavement of this stretch, and so.
Yeah.
If a property owner wanted to pave this stretch, they would need to come and see you.
And they've confirmed, the planning board has confirmed that?
But
The planning board isn't completed their
Assessment.
But they didn't
process.
comment about that.
No, they don't have comment.
I'm just sort of, I mean, it's like the whole driveway goes over to there, that's gravel right now, right?
Correct.
Right. So basically, you're saying that only for the development, you gotta do this, but this you're not gonna worry about, because it's not part of the development, but having that as what this was, sort of affects, you know, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's like doing something, it doesn't seem complete unless you finished it all the way to the rest of it
Right.
in this area, but maybe I'm just, I don't know enough about it, but doesn't that seem strange to you? I
It's
don't-
just not a shared drive once you get
I
past.
I understand that.
Yeah,
But if we're doing this whole thing to make a reservoir to protect all of this, isn't this part of the wetland too that needs to be protected as well? I mean, other than that, it's,
Well,
you
the
know,
pit,
I understand.
I will say the pit, I mean, this is the low, this is the low spot right here, right?
I understand that.
So even if whatever little bit doesn't,
That
so
looks
can
like
the ground
about a
here.
third of what's,
I think that this was proposed though, because if it was an impervious surface, then we would, because now we're going back and redesigning the driveway
No,
to accommodate the three lots. If it was impervious, now we have to do swales on either side to
No,
accommodate the stormwater.
that's not the question I have. The question I was bringing up was, if we're doing this as the new way of doing it, why are we ignoring that when it's part of the whole system here? And these people that own this are actually selling these lots, right?
correct.
So,
I think just because it's an existing driveway, it's not being redesigned, right? It's just
That's-
not
Yeah,
being
but
redesigned, so if we're redesigning,
understand
now we
that.
have to run the stormwater.
so, you know, is it gonna rain more here than there?
No,
I
but-
don't,
No.
I'm just sort of, maybe I'm not trying to be off, but I don't understand. If you're doing
It's
this,
a different
why don't you?
project, yeah. It's a different project.
Yeah, I mean, it's existing that way, and it's been that way for a
Yeah.
long time, so, you know, I reckon that somebody could say, well, we'd like to, you know, redo this driveway and make it
Yeah, I understand.
pavers or pavement or something different, and then they could come and discuss that.
For the people who are doing the
What?
development now, it seems to me now is the time to do it rather than,
What is the
10
grade
years ago,
difference
right?
between
But if they
gravel
didn't
and
have to pave
impervious pavement?
This would be
That's
a
what it comes
non-issue,
down
What's the
right?
difference
Yeah.
in the grade?
Yeah, it has to be
Will
paved
it be
because
It's
of
a-
the number of
So
houses
it
won't be affected.
being
Yeah, so
great
that's
So
nice
you
driveways.
won't-
to put it through
you
here,
won't
right?
see-
Maybe we should have one conversation here at a
But
time.
it's not required.
okay.
So it's,
I don't,
That's
just
what I
because
was-
it
Law, it's not
If they
required.
didn't have to upgrade
It's
it
a single
to
driveway
a
at
paved
that point.
driveway, then none of this would even have to
but
happen.
basically, this driveway becomes shared too, because there's still a lot there, right?
This
I'm
part is
just-
Well, that's-
shared.
well,
They're not
This,
sharing
this
past
is,
it.
Yeah,
imagine
it's-
this
and
part
it's
as
just
being the
legally they don't
same
have to do it.
as one of these.
Right.
This is just becoming a personal driveway, just happens to have an easement through this
And
person's
it-
lot,
and
right? So
it
this
doesn't make
is the
sense.
same as
Somebody, one little
this.
stretch is
It's
reasonable,
just
but
a personal
legally they don't have to
driveway
do it.
off of the shared
So-
driveway.
It's an added cost.
Yeah, and but it does bring up other questions, right? And this is the big ones too. That this is, you know, proposed improvements to existing driveway, but it's not. The driveway as it exists was conditioned by the Conservation Commission. I don't like to tear up their old stuff. They did a good job on it. They did it right. You can regrade that gravel driveway, no problem. I had a gravel driveway for years. You don't get ponding on it if you maintain it. All right, it really hasn't sloughed off to the sides. I think the only reason we need to condition to think about paving is if this becomes a shared driveway now, right? But the whole thing with this is going, like, has this already been accepted as an easement on some, like, has this property been broken off and this is accepted as an easement?
That's under review. as
Right,
well.
so, but if that's under review, then how the heck can we approve this if we don't know, because this is the existing driveway as it stands. You're asking that this be taken off and be part of a different lot with an easement, but you're asking us to approve the entire
But that's
driveway, but this is
contingent
still
on
part of the
lots.
driveway, this has not been
The driveway
approved.
upgrades is contingent on the lot.
Right,
design.
right, so how can we approve this until you've gotten that approved?
So the
Does that make any sense?
It's one of these kind of cat and mouse games with
Right.
the planning board, right? Because the planning board, you know, would like the feedback from
Sure.
the commission to know that this is consistent with the Wetland Protection Act and its
I
regulations.
see what you're saying.
And so you can approve this project and issue an order of conditions. It can't be built unless
Right.
the planning board approves it. So, you know, it's fine to have an order of conditions
Right.
for a project that may or may not get approved
Sure.
by a planning board. And then
Sure.
if it did not get approved by a planning board, it would never be built, right?
But my
So-
problem is, I don't know what project is it, are they taking care of their existing driveway, or are we doing a shared driveway / mini development? Like, what are we doing? Like, until I know, it's hard for me to say, yeah, you can do the road like that, but if the planning board says that, you know, this can't be an easement, that's part of the shared driveway, well then, no, you can't stop the road there, then I need to condition this too.
Then at that point, we would have to come back.
Right, but I'm not gonna
Yeah.
condition this until I know whether I need to condition that too. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's hard for me
If
to
additional
say,
work-
like, I think it's a good idea with the permeable surface, I think that could absolutely
That's what I
work.
was trying to get.
But I don't know what I'm conditioning.
This driveway.
I don't
we
know
said
where this
last-
driveway is
we said
going.
this
I
in
need
our
to
last
know what
meeting,
lots
though,
are
that the
approved. You would-
driveway is contingent upon the three lot, we already had concerns about the lot, so
Right.
we can't sit here and say, oh yeah, the driveway looks great, but we don't even really know if lot 4 and 3 are developable, right?
Right, and like with the additional intake that the driveway will or will not bring about, or if it will help with the intake, if it causes more flow underneath, we kind of need to know what's going on with everything else first.
What you would be approving would be the scope of work shown
Right.
on this plan as it relates only to the driveway.
Right, but here's
But
the
we
thing, like,
can't
I
develop-
can't tell you to stockpile, I don't want anything stockpiled here. If you're building a house here and you're gonna clear it, okay, it makes sense, you can stockpile.
Mhm.
If you're not building a house there, you shouldn't stockpile anything there,
Mhm.
not at all. So how the heck can I tell you where to stockpile if I don't know what the heck's been approved,
Mhm.
what's there, what's not? I mean, it's a very, 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 very sensitive area. And just throwing darts with, well, we'll condition it upon this or that, like,
So maybe
show
it
me the
makes sense
project.
then if we switch over to lot 3.
That might make, I mean,
But
that's
I
just
think-
me, I'd like to hear other people's thoughts too, and I know Rebecca had some questions on the driveway too, I'd like to get to those first.
I
But
gave-
that's my big stop right now, is I don't know the extent of this project.
I gave you my opinion. Well,
Yeah,
that's
so,
exactly what I was
yeah.
trying to get at, is that it seems to me, right now, what we're looking at is, that's the whole project right there.
Well,
But
it wouldn't
could
be, no, it wouldn't, I mean, it's, you know, it's fairly possible that zoning board could say, no, that's an
No.
easement, and that's a private driveway. You know, this is their personal lot, and their driveway's on part of it, and the other half is shared, and then like.
But you're right, it is a sensitive area, and you can't, unless you know everything else that's going on in there.
Right, and it, I mean, it's,
I agree.
It's interesting maintenance, because this person's driveway is gonna be in their front yard. I'd go to zoning board and question that. Planning board, their driveway's in their front yard, and they're responsible for maintaining it. So if this is a gravel driveway, and the whole thing sloughs off into their front yard, there's ruts and all that, they stare at it. Like, that's, their easement driveway in your front yard that's not paved, but everybody else's driveway is, that's just a weird plan. Like, I don't think anybody would approve that. It would seem like that would be kind of.
Are they gonna be raking the gravel off that person's
Well, but
property?
they can, there'd be an easement, it would be somebody else's gravel driveway in your front yard
Right.
that you can't touch or maintain, and you need to hope that they do.
Can I snowblow it into their yard too?
No, probably not, unless you have permission. Right, you can only stay on your easement. It's a weird plan, I don't know how they would approve that.
Well,
They might, they very well might, but until they do, I don't wanna touch that.
And those are,
Like, who
I don't
does
know,
that?
those are kind of like planning board.
Do you think?
Yeah,
Every town
Well, I
has their
think
own
aside
rules,
from the planning
you know.
board, we had discussed in our last meeting that
Go
this driveway layout is contingent upon, we had concerns about lot 4, we had concerns about lot
Yeah.
3, so to sit here and first approve a driveway, but then have concerns about the 2 lots that are coming off of it, I don't really know how we can do that.
Yeah.
I feel like it needs to kind of,
Right.
we need to address our concerns with lots 3 and 4 before we can even.
Yeah.
That makes sense, what you're talking about. I hear that all completely. If we came in with an application that was simply taking an existing gravel driveway in the town of Wilton and saying that we wanna improve the surface of it with drainage underneath it.
Yeah.
And present it to you as a net benefit to resource areas for the purposes of stormwater management. To me, I don't sit on that side of the table,
Sure.
but to me that seems a very approvable type of project
Well,
under the regulations.
What if the person came in and said, I wanna do half the driveway, leave the other half out, and I'm gonna have to trench and gut the whole thing? Wouldn't you say, well, rather than trenching and gutting it, if you're not doing the whole driveway, why don't we just leave it the way it is? It seems to be functioning fine. You can regrade it. There's less mess to the buffer zone. It's been functioning fine all these years. You're only gonna do half the driveway, so it's not like you care about fixing the whole area. You're only doing half. I would say it's not worth gutting the whole thing out. And you always do that when you sit on that side of the table saying, no, if it was my town, I'd say, just do half the driveway. No, I think that's stupid. I don't think anybody would say, gut half the driveway, and that will make it better. No, either improve the full thing, or don't go in there and gut it all out and improve half of it.
Right.
And that's just me. That doesn't make sense when you say things like that. That would make more sense to you? No, it doesn't make more sense.
I agree with that, by the way.
Am I crazy? What do you?
No,
You may
I
be,
think
but-
where that argument, where that discussion would be valid is you're right. If you were saying a single family home is approaching the Concom
Mhm.
for
To
a
improve
net
it.
benefit to improve the entirety of the driveway. Because that's normally what someone would do, or they wanna pave the whole driveway, or they wanna change the whole driveway. But it's very rare, if at all, that on a single family home, someone would say, I just wanna do half my driveway and have a net benefit of half my driveway, because then eventually either they'll do the rest because now it's wearing differently, or they'll not do it at all. And so just sort of bringing it back, because I think that is a
Yeah.
valid argument, a valid question. If, because I'm not planning board and I don't know, and it's more so their jurisdiction as far as how much driveway needs to be within the infrastructure that's necessary for a shared or common driveway. At the, I'll call it the fuse point, at the join where the gravel would meet the permeable surface, if in fact that's the way it is, what would be the impact in terms of, is there going to be pooling in that area? Because right now, when we're out on site, I know there was pooling further up where you were describing, but then there's also pooling further back, and I'm pretty sure it's right around that area. So would that be improving? Would you be infiltrating that water within that reservoir below the pavement? And how are you then redirecting what's pooling on the gravel area just above it? Do you understand what my question is? So
You're asking
basically,
if water was to come down here
Yep.
and enter into the reservoir?
yes, either enter into the reservoir, or will it just be draining to the, as it is now? And then in addition, are you gonna cause, would that cause pooling at the edge of that reservoir? Basically, what would the implications be to that end of the driveway if it's not finished?
I mean, when we were out there during the large event, we didn't see signs of, this is a very flat driveway, right? Except for this one little, there's a little pitch right here. Other than that, this whole thing is like dead on flat.
Mhm.
So you don't get velocities channelized
Yep.
running through that are creating scouring and things like that.
Right.
So more or less, what you get is what lands on the surface.
Okay, so you're saying it's gonna stay relatively the same?
Yeah, I mean, so there's no proposed change to what's here, so how, the water that soaks in the ground here will continue to soak in the ground here. On top of that, the other thing that's important to consider is, at this point in the site, right through here,
Yep.
there is a major soil change to the site conditions, right? So from this point this way is where you have that class C soils that we talked about, the wonderful where this water does not infiltrate. Up here, it's all sand and gravel. So where there's sand and gravel, it already has that infiltrated capacity in the subsurface. And so it effectively does, what we're doing here already happens here. Because it's all coarse sand and gravel. Test pits were done along here, test pits were done along here. It's as far as you can dig. It's, you know, stuff that people could mine for, you know, septic system sand. I mean, it's like that good of coarseness. So it's really not a necessary thing to do over here. We already have good permeability. It's the section of the driveway that is impaired. So maybe, I think it might be good for us to move on to discuss lot 3.
Excuse me, can I ask a question about this before we move on?
That is a good point. Usually, if we're gonna hit all, I usually do open it up to the audience. Yeah. So yes, if you do have a question regarding just the driveway we're talking about right now, okay. And if you could just state your name, sorry.
Richard Davis, 185 Hudson Road. Taking out 18 inches of soil below the driveway is going to impact an awful lot of tree roots. And I would think every tree diameter that's tangent to that driveway right now has a very, very slim chance of surviving. These roots are pretty much, you know, on the surface and within, you know, the top 2 feet, you know, of the surface. Plus the stability of the tree and wind, it's not gonna be anchored in 365 degrees the way the roots have grown. Point number 2, we've focused on this in terms of the wet season. What about when we sort of get toward the drier season? Is this trench with all the gravel going to actually draw moisture from adjacent areas that may be wetlands?
It's a good question. Does water backflow? Do you know? I guess it would be possible. Would water be able to backflow into the fill in it? Like, you know, as water infiltrates down and out, could water possibly fill into the reservoir from the sides?
Well, except
Just imagine.
the answer is, it's, the whole earth has soil and rock underneath it, right, with various void spaces. The intent of this is that this has larger void spaces than the fines that are there. So insofar as groundwater is already coming in contact with this area, it would go into it.
Right.
However, the test pits that we have done in the areas immediately adjacent to this, for the purpose of the design, is to set this bay above the groundwater table. So for example, in here, where they did the test pits for lot 3, you know, the high ground, I can just check the test pit logs. I wanna say it's 3 feet down, right? So something on that order of magnitude. We have it on the detail here, but you know, we're below, the groundwater is below the bottom of this trench.
Right.
So the only water that would ever be able to get into the trench would be rainwater that lands on it, or if, I guess if we ever had a 100-year storm event, and you
Which
got.
we have every other year. I mean, it's not a laughing matter. We have the 100-year storm event often. It's gonna be coming more and more often.
I hear you.
So,
And
please go ahead.
right, so if you had a situation where water ever rose over the 100-year floodplain elevation,
Yeah.
and it would then enter in from the top. So, but it would never be a groundwater condition, because the groundwater is always below the
Right,
water.
unless the water.
And groundwater is what feeds the wetlands, and we also are immediately adjacent to the wetlands.
What is the hard red line that approaches the driveway, kind of right in the middle?
Bordering
And up above there, at the other side?
This is
Well, no, it's the
this is
bordering
one
land subject to
100-year
flooding.
floodplain elevation.
Okay.
That's 35 feet.
Yes, so this is out of the floodplain, this is in the floodplain, if that makes sense.
So this is in the floodplain?
Yes.
This is the floodplain.
Yeah.
So the video that Mr. Davis has shown, will show water moving through the floodplain areas of the site.
Back capacity.
Yes.
I'm a little concerned that this area in here may be wet all the time right now, and if you've got this permeable area right there, I don't know what these tests showed in terms of groundwater elevation. Whether it's just going to kind of wick this away and end up effectively drying this out.
Can I just say something right now? We have a lot of stuff to go over. It doesn't seem as though we could say yay or nay to this driveway until you figure out whether or not that easement is going
Well,
to
we
be.
should.
Or what
yeah,
else is
we
going
should
on in the rest of this, so maybe we should
Right.
move on. And, that's a good idea to get rid of the rainwater, if it works. I still don't understand why they don't do the whole driveway back to this house here. If it's good for here, it ought to be good for there too, but I think we should move it to the
Yeah,
next
we're
one.
gonna have to leave.
Otherwise, we could be
Right.
here all night and it looks
Was-
like.
Was
people
anyone
walk out.
else here though, did anybody else in the audience want a question on the proposed improvements to the existing driveway for 21 Century Mill Road? Alright.
Good.
Do you have any questions on the driveway, or is there, if we move on to lot 3?
Move
I was gonna say, we'll open it up to questions again on that.
Okay. And I gave you a copy of the site plan, right?
Lot
In the-
4,
in the
did
page.
we?
Yeah.
I do, we
Which,
want to.
which was the one was the one
Lot
that?
4 was vernal pools, lot 3 was in the buffer, the 75% of the house was in the buffer.
Right, so, and we'll move on.
Yeah.
Oh, we're doing lot 3.
Lot three?
We'll go 3 first.
So,
Steve.
so I have we
asked
brought
for
this back to the drawing
proposed,
board
yeah.
with the engineer to look at it in light of your comments. So this layout here was the original proposal that the house
What
was.
is this buffer off of, right here?
That's the purple line?
No, the red, that's a
The-
buffer,
the
but
red
it
line.
doesn't follow this.
No, it's
not a
not a
buffer.
buffer.
It's
It's
a
floodplain.
That's the
FEMA
floodplain?
floodplain, yeah. Where is
Okay.
the
Okay,
buffer
okay,
zone?
okay.
That one.
Okay, got it. All right.
Okay.
The
So
house.
we relooked at lot 3, and I have a revised site plan to give you, and this is it right here. The engineer, per your instructions, was instructed to try to squeeze everything as far forward as possible. And in the previous version of the plan, the house was set back coming down here. And we came in contact to the 100-foot floodplain line, or just shy of it. So he was able to move it approximately 20 feet out of it. So now, only 1,500 square feet of infrastructure is proposed within the 100-foot buffer zone. Okay, so that was minimized to the maximum extent practical.
Didn't make the house smaller though. We had talked about not having a 4-bedroom house, right?
And how much is
The
this?
size of the
Still a
system.
3,000
About
square
1,500
foot,
square feet.
4-bedroom house.
Yeah, we talked about doing a 3-bedroom system, is that for the septic?
Right now,
Right, that's what we had talked about, I know
Well,
you said we had,
look, we're trying to make the house, fit within the minimum amount of impact, into the buffer zone possible.
right,
So,
but I did specifically ask to see what a 3-bedroom system would look like. You
With a
said this was per
smaller
our
house.
instructions, and I was like,
Well-
I hate when you use terms like per our instructions. I didn't instruct you to come up with a 4-bedroom house and
well,
put
I
it this.
don't
I
think
did
suggested
ask that
that,
we should,
no.
I said we'd like to have everything out of the buffer zone, I couldn't understand, and I did ask, can I see it with a 3-bedroom system, because minimizing the size of the system would allow everything to be pulled out. That is what I asked at that meeting. I'm just saying, I wanna hear this,
No,
but please, just so everybody at home's clear as to what was asked at the meeting and now what's being
I do
done.
recall you mentioning,
Okay.
the discussion of it.
But this wasn't like we told you to draw it this way.
No.
Okay.
I believe,
So we're clear.
I believe the instructions were trying to make
Minimize,
things
right,
outside
and
of
I-
the buffer as much as
We're
possible.
very clear about a 3-bedroom system
Right.
too.
So, the proposal still remains to be a 4-bedroom system on this lot, with the septic system as designed and the house pushed back as much as the engineer felt as was possible.
Okay.
So, utilizing a 4-bedroom design and a 4-bedroom house, this design is a significantly improved effort from the original version that
According
you were, well,
You.
Yeah.
I don't know
Well,
who said it was significantly improved.
Oh.
Was that an engineer that said this is significantly improved?
it's, okay, let me.
I'm just saying, you
It's
seem
about-
like you're
it's-
saying
it's a-
somebody has said it's significantly improved, and I never said it was significantly
No,
improved.
I'm suggesting.
You're saying, okay,
Yeah.
but this is not officially that it was significantly improved. I'm
It's-
saying you
it's
moved
a-
it forward. We don't need the beautiful
Right.
words of how great it is, just give me the facts.
It's about 20 feet further from the wetlands than was previously built.
Excellent.
Okay, because previously it was right up against
Right.
this line, and now it's all been
Right.
brought forward, okay? So, the extent of the work in the BLSF, which is the area outside of the 310, is about 4,500 square feet. There was a question last time about if it was more or less than 5,000 square feet, if it triggered wildlife habitat presumptions. The number on this is 4,500
On this lot.
square feet on this lot 3. Okay. And, yeah, so with a 4-bedroom design.
Yep.
That the engineer believes this footprint has been reasonably minimized to fit the site conditions, okay?
Right, but
ways-
again, well,
You know, there may be ways to do things that are more awkward, but this is consistent.
no, I'm not
with-
talking awkward. I'm saying a 3-bedroom system, which is what I asked to see, would significantly
smaller
shrink the
footprint
house,
house.
right? It's,
Right.
if the house is smaller, we're pulling more out of the buffer zone. I mean, to
We're
say we only
in
have.
the buffer zone with a giant 4-bedroom, 3,500
Yeah.
square foot house, right?
And again, well, and saying it's only 1,500 square feet in the buffer zone. The goal for the buffer zone is
Is
zero. Zero. Only 1,500 square feet. Is 1,500 square feet too much? You know, if you came back with a 3-bedroom house and you said, wow, that 1,500 square feet is now 600 square feet, then, you know, maybe we can talk more about conditioning.
It-
But our first goal is to get it out of the buffer zone. It's the first thing we're tasked to do. And one of the easiest ways with something like this is to say, look, you don't need a mega house. A 3-bedroom house is fine. It's gonna pull a lot of it out of the buffer zone, which is what we're tasked to do.
Right.
I'd like to see, I mean, I know I asked last time, but again, I'd really like to see what a 3-bedroom system would do to that lot, how much that would pull out of the resource area.
If a project can be
Go ahead.
designed in a way that's consistent with the bylaw and the setbacks and standards set forth in your bylaw, and then some, right? I mean, the bylaw seems to allow alteration of work up to 25 feet
Yep.
to the wetlands. This project here preserves a lot of land even beyond 25 feet in its natural state. The 25-foot line is.
That's by law, you have to do that, right?
Right.
So that
So-
we're not doing any favors.
So if, under the Bolton bylaw, right?
Yeah.
So if those
Which
standards.
again is the law in town.
Right, if those standards are satisfied, is that something that a conservation commission can approve and does approve in the town of Bolton?
Well, it has to be practical as well, in terms of the natural resources impacted, which are defined within the bylaw. So, the short answer is, if it meets all the regulations, and if the commission sees that it's not a negative impact to those resource areas, and work is practical regarding all the jurisdictional areas that they're basically empowered to look at these designs with, then yes, but it seems like there's still some contention as to, is this practical for the site? And it seems like, and I'm not speaking for the commission, but it seems like there can be more work done to reduce the impact to those resource areas, whether you're talking about the adjacent upland resource area, or whether you're talking to the bordering land subject to flooding. I mean, to me, even if you're reducing the size of the footprint of the house, the septic system itself, that would by just pure altering everything, it's gonna pull the well out of that little notch there as well, reducing the impact to the BLSF even further.
Is that a mounted system, or is that system flat on the grid? Just
So the elevation at the tank was 314, this is 313, this is 312, 311.
Where's the well?
Right here.
And the siting of the wells are driven by setbacks to septic systems.
And also, I'd like to point out, Brian is right, the commission has the right under the bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act to look at alternative analysis. And we requested specifically a 3-bedroom home or a 3-bedroom system, specific alternative analysis if you were going to propose on lot 3. And maybe it's not practical, but you have not proven to us otherwise. So I think it is to a point of the members that are concerned about that you have yet to show us that it's not practical for the site.
Okay, well, I'm gonna request a continuation to this discussion and the driveway discussion.
Can I ask quick though, is there any comments here for lot 3, Century Mill Road? Again, just regarding lot
Yeah,
three.
Richard Davis, yes. What's the current grade, right, with the septic system, is the existing grade? Could we tell that?
Could you
looking
tell
at
us the
this?
existing grade of what the accepting, and if you could just ask your questions to us and we should forward this, yes, thank you.
Protocol.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so the ground here is 310, so I'd have to probably get more detail on that. It's gonna be in the, it's probably in the 311 range, you know, it's not significantly above it. You know, there's, it's gotta be, yeah, it's gotta be pretty darn close to between 310 and 311. Because it's just above 310, we don't have a 311 contour in there.
And existing grade now was 310?
310 and they're bringing it up to
So-
313.
So, yeah,
So
just
let's
a
call
minor.
it 310 and a half.
Yeah.
I thought you said 314. I thought
Here's your,
314 was mentioned
here's your
as-
310
as to the
contour.
top of the
As
septic
to,
field.
yeah, and then.
And then
there's
this is
point
all
up, it was a
fill.
top of
4 feet from
Berman.
current,
Yeah, and no
Yeah.
amount down.
so it is a mound.
Mhm.
That's my question.
Ready to move on?
I think so, and,
Okay.
So, the next best thing to do is to, move on to the other 2 lots. So this is lot, so here's lot 4, and I have a revised plan here, and I'm gonna give you a copy of it, Jim. So these are kind of hot off the presses as of today. Lot 4 had a proposed area of floodplain compensation. And we did provide compensatory storage to that. We meaning the design engineer, has revised the plan to, rather than fill the floodplain and compensate, in order to demonstrate ease of compliance, he has shown a small retaining wall, stone block retaining wall here, to hold the grade back and then not fill this section of floodplain and not do compensatory storage. So all the work on that's been pulled out of the floodplain. So,
what are the suspected vernal pools? I thought those were lot 4,
That they are.
They are.
right?
Yeah.
And that was our instructions last time, is we wanted to see the offsets with the suspected vernal pools drawn on that. Was that not exactly what we asked for, is to put the suspected vernal pools on, because we're well within our right to call those suspected vernal pools under the town bylaws, and that we wanted to see a redrawn map with the offsets to the suspected vernal pools. And I don't even see the suspected vernal pools drawn on it.
What it said in the minutes was lot 2 and lot 4 include the area the commission viewed as a site for vernal pools by the National Heritage Endangered Species Overlay. But
Do you want us to keep going, or do you want us to continue until next time so you can put those on? Because I'm honestly not gonna even really consider anything until I see what the suspected vernal
Well-
pools are and what the offsets are. I mean, there's no point in me really looking at it, right? Because all of it will change once those are drawn onto the map. 100% will change what you're doing once those are drawn on, right?
Well, I think that it might be useful for us to have a discussion about
Go ahead.
whether that request is something that I can or should accommodate on these plans.
Okay.
So that sort of goes back to the ORAD process. And I know your agent and I have discussed this a little bit. Have you had any further thoughts about that topic
Yes,
since we?
so Scott had sent me, the recording of the minutes, he went through and said this is where the ORAD was issued. Do you see here where I say, about all wetland resource areas? So I went back, I reviewed the video, and what he is doing at that point of the video is explaining why someone would file an ANRAD and receive an ORAD, and that is to delineate all the wetland resource areas on the site. And so you're correct, you do say typically that is what is done. At the end of that public hearing, within that same recording, we issue the ORAD, the commission makes the motion to issue the ORAD per the delineation that's done on the site. Now, at that time, you then, if we wanna get into specifics, state, remember we list off the buffer zone, we list off riverfront area, we list off, bordering vegetated wetland, and all the ones that you, yes, have delineated drawn lines for on this and surveyed them. Done the wetland delineation for those resources that you specifically requested, both in your narrative, on the plan, and then in person, when we go over the ORAD when it was issued, and you say, oh, VLSF as well, and I say, okay, and I add it in. Then the commission proceeds to issue that ORAD. So that's what we have before us today to consider.
And I think the reason for that request was to make sure that it was comprehensive for everything on the site.
Okay.
In order, an ANRAD, right? If I ask the commission, what is the purpose of an ANRAD?
Yep.
Why do we do it?
We're not gonna do, wait, stop. We're way behind tonight, we're not gonna do education, we're not gonna do all these things, it's fine. All right, no, my turn to talk, sorry. We say that those are suspected vernal pools. Now, you're saying legally we're wrong, and maybe you wanna challenge that, but I'm sticking with that. If I can call those suspected vernal pools, they're suspected vernal pools. If you wanna challenge that legally, challenge it legally, but we're not gonna have a 4-hour discussion now about what an ANRAD means. I know what an ANRAD means, what an ORAD is. I don't need an education. I'm telling you, I know that that's I don't know, I suspect that that's a vernal pool, and I have laws on my bylaws telling me what I should do if it's a suspected vernal pool, and I'm going to follow those. And if you think I'm wrong and you want to challenge it, that's fine. But I'm not gonna have a 2-hour thing about what an ANRAD is, what an ORAD is. I'm telling you right now, I'm calling those suspected vernal pools, and I would like to see them drawn on any plan before it's submitted, with the offsets to those suspected vernal pools, under our bylaws. All right, go ahead. I mean, is there another question? Again, I'm way behind on this. Is there a question about that?
Two brief responses to that.
Please.
One is sort of administrative/legal, and the other is practical.
Sure.
I have reviewed this very carefully, this issue. The ORAD, the intent of the ORAD is to do proper land planning. That's why we submitted the ORAD, is to confirm all the resource areas on the site. I did ask Rebecca, I said, if someone's intent is to confirm all the resource areas on the site, what would they do to do that?
And right within your narrative and within the ANRAD to request all.
Right, and so I pulled up the ANRAD, which is, here's the original application, September 13, 2017.
Are you gonna try to convince me legally that I'm wrong?
No.
Because I'm not gonna spend another half an hour. Again, I'm way behind on time. If you wanna try to convince me legally that I'm wrong, I'm not gonna sit here and listen to this for another 4 hours. I'm telling you, I'm calling that a suspected vernal pool. And if you're saying I legally can't, then make the case somewhere else, but We're not gonna do a 4-hour-long educational program where you talk to us about ANRADs. And I'm not trying to give you a hard time, Scott. I'm just saying that's a suspected vernal pool. I really can't say any more about these plans until I see the suspected vernal pool drawn on there and all the offsets. And that's the same with 2 and 4.
But
So again, is there anything else tonight? Are you gonna come back with plans with the suspected vernal pools drawn on and the offsets as we had requested? Because again, I'm out of time. I'm way past it.
I am going
I'm
to
dealing with a cold. I'd like to get home at some point in time
I'll give you
tonight.
to the record.
Go ahead,
a
please.
Copy of the ANRAD, which you should already have.
We do have.
But it does say seeking confirmation of all resource areas right there in the first paragraph. That was the purpose of the ANRAD. This commission made a finding per that request. I cannot legally show you something different than that. Otherwise, I would be in violation of the law. Scott Hayes would be in violation of his professional license. We're bound by.
We're gonna have to
do that.
review this and see who's
Okay.
in the wrong, because
No.
I cannot approve these plans without seeing that suspected vernal pool on there. I can't do it. I cannot do it. Under the town bylaws, we need to see those suspected vernal pools on there. We need to see the offsets. I can't do it. I cannot approve this plan without seeing
The
those offsets.
bylaw requires us to show all the
Okay.
resource areas, and we sought them to be confirmed by you guys.
Yeah, and there's a suspected vernal pool out there as well.
Which so that was the legal side.
Sure.
The practical side is this. We witnessed these areas in high groundwater conditions in a peak storm event.
I was gonna say, just
And-
describe a peak storm event. How is that determined as a peak storm event? Is that the high storm event for the year?
A 1-year storm.
That's
in a high
considered a
ground.
once a year storm event that we went out there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, it measured.
I'm
somewhere in
just
the
saying, when
2
you
to
use
2.5
terms like
range.
that was the peak storm event for the year, I just wanna make sure that that was legally the highest storm event for the year. That's what we
No,
consider a
what-
2-inch storm.
If we've had, I don't know, have we had a 4-inch storm this year?
I
think
don't
so.
know. I don't know whether.
But it's
We did in
it's
March.
it's
I bet we did in March.
Right, so.
But
so
I'm
we-
trying to
so-
see what the question is. Again, I'm out of time, Scott. You either put the suspected vernal pools on there or you don't. I'm gonna make a motion that we close. No, that we, actually, I can't even continue unless he asks to continue, can I? So
I-
we'd have to,
I
we
will,
really
I
can't
am going to
close.
request to continue the discussion.
All right.
Good.
But-
I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearings
Second.
for Century Mill Lot, proposed driveway improvement, Century Mill Lot 2, Century Mill Lot 3, and Century Mill Lot 4, until our next meeting, October 16th, 2018, at 8 o'clock, first opening?
Yes.
What was the date again?
October 16th.
I mean, do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye? And I'm sorry, Scott, I just don't have time tonight. I mean, we're not gonna argue that out legally here.
Well, I
We're
think-
just not gonna do it, and we're done, so.
I mean, maybe you and I
Do
can
you
discuss this
have-
outside of the public hearing process.
To an extent, but much of the discussion has to be done during the public hearing process, but I'll review,
I would like to, but I was just shut down.
I understand.
I understand.
So I think,
Scott, turn around.
so to clarify,
I
Okay,
understand,
yeah, good.
that you have a lot going
to
on.
clarify, what I'm saying is, once you review your things, I review my things, you wanna send me any questions you have, I'll send you any questions I have, and then those
We'll come
answer to
before.
those questions will come before the Concom.
Fair enough.
Okay?
Perfect.
Makes sense.
Thank
I
you.
have one question.
No.
I'm sorry, we've already continued, yeah, we're closed. I'm sorry, yeah,
Save
yeah.
it, save it. He'll be back.
You will be able to ask that question, and it's hard to ask any questions until we know what the actual plans are, which we're not gonna know just yet.
I might not be able to make the next session.
I am, so we will
You
definitely
can
allow
email
public
me
comment
the
to
question.
Rebecca, yeah.
I think you know my question.
Uh-huh.
Should we know some?
I might,
Thank you.
yeah.
Take a donut? Take a donut?
I'm doing well.
Nobody wanted
Chapter 61.
No, I have.
to. Take them home to the kids.
Apple crisp in
Okay, so you're.
We'll take them home to the kids. Nobody else wants them. Consent of the school.
So, we have
So the teacher's
a,
right. We gotta put up a false sucker.
it actually should say
Oh, discussion rather than public hearing.
So,
Go ahead.
we have received a request for, I'll pass this around, so it's lot 2 that we're looking at. A representative of Paul Zeka, owner of certain parcels of land on Green Road, Bolton, Mass. I have been authorized and directed by Mr. Zeka to do all acts necessary to remove property from chapter 61A, any agriculture in some extent, status, and obtain a release of the tax lien and right of first refusal as provided for in the statute. Title to property now stands in Paul's Zeka. The parcel is identified as Bolton Assessor's Map, parcel 34, C, 6C, 18.1. So that's that lot at the corner. So the question is,
It's this one here, that's bordered by, it's 3 frontages.
there's a notice of intent to sell for residential use. Currently, so they're looking to pull it out of agricultural use, out of chapter land, and they have to pay back taxes up to 5 years. That's how you pull it out of chapter land in general. In addition to obviously some paperwork that goes along with it, and having the town say they're not going to act on right of first refusal. So ultimately, it is up to the Board of Selectmen, but they have asked us to comment and planning board per the usual process. The gross sales price is $185,000. The land will be used for residential purposes. The parcel of land subject to chapter 61A contain approximately 2.507 acres of area, more specifically identified as lot 2 on the plan of land recorded with Worcester Registry of Deeds, plan book 505, page 97, which is what I just passed around. Again, so the question before us is, would we like the town to act on right of first refusal, or would we deem that this is fine to turn to residential use without any contention? Bear in mind, it is on the corner of Harvard Road. Bower Springs is further up the road into the, coming up this way.
Right.
And actually adjacent to that property is the conservation restriction for, or one of the conservation restrictions for the Weatherby property. There's a small strip of land in between Old Harvard Road and Harvard Road. And it's just that, just under a 3-acre parcel that's outside of that conservation restriction. So much of the area will, in terms of that strip between Old Harvard Road and Harvard Road, will remain as is, so it would solely be that.
What do you think the selectmen would say?
They're looking for our input, so.
Our open space and rec plan, that was my one question, was it contingent, contiguous with anything we already had?
Technically, it's not
Yeah.
contiguous with land that the town owns, but we
Yeah.
do hold jointly with the Conservation Trust, I believe, that conservation restriction. It's not to say that a new homeowner would want to increase that area, but it's not to say they wouldn't want to either. But that is a possibility, as well as maybe working with this individual to act on the right of first refusal, or maybe to not act on the right of first refusal in the respect that they would be willing to put a conservation restriction. There are options, but they're just looking for input at this point because we only have so much time to act on the right of first refusal.
Is it part of a bigger parcel, or is it just that?
So it's just itself,
It's just
if
the
you,
2.5
so
acres?
it's just the 2.5 acres that they're considering. Like I said, where you see that parcel line between Old Harvard Road and Harvard Road, from there to the north, if you're looking at it on a map, or to the right side of that page, basically, that's the strip of Witherby conservation restriction. So it's under a restriction,
Whether
so
it connects
there's,
to Bowers.
it's limited to
Okay.
what they can
Right.
do.
What is this now? Is it
It's a hay
cleared?
field almost,
It's
it's
a
a
giant
meadow.
field.
Yeah.
Do you remember where it was on our open space and rec plan? Was it in priority land of any?
I mean, it is contiguous to an area that has a conservation restriction on it, which I've already stated. So in that sense it would be keeping with the rural character of the town in terms of preserving that. It may also meet that same criteria if it's developed in a responsible manner. So, trying to think of the things that preserving it would check off solely, not with residential development as well. That would be, it's contiguous to, but again, that may meet the residential area as well. Recreation, whether it be passive or active. I don't know if that's even really applicable here, because you have the Witherby conservation restriction with the trail easement, but it's so far north of that parcel, it wouldn't ever connect to this, because there's no trail easements through the current restriction.
What do you think that is?
And then in
Yeah.
addition, it'd be wildlife, habitat, which is a meadow. But that's really the only criteria that would be separated from the others.
So what would we do with this if we just?
Well,
Leave
we
it
would
as
feel-
is, it would be maintained
Yeah.
as a meadow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
how much poison ivy sums?
probably a lot, but, yeah, the town, as I think Rebecca explained well, but like when people put land into chapter land, when you pull it out, part of things, the town gets a right of first refusal if we wanna actually purchase the land.
Right.
So when it's 61A, is that protected? Or it's just classified as agricultural?
It's classified as agricultural, so the use for that parcel is very specific.
Okay.
So just like with forestry, if it's under chapter 61, it has to be under forestry, so that means you can't build on it. It just has to be timber harvesting. Sometimes only a portion of the property is under chapter, which means you can have your home and practice forestry or agriculture depending on what it's under. So with this, it's agriculture, so they have been hanging it, to my understanding, for many years.
Thoughts, questions? This is one of those ones where I'd love to just email Rebecca my thoughts, cause I wanna take a look at our open space and rec and see where it hits on those maps.
Okay.
And just kind of take a look at it. Google Earth is wonderful for looking at where that connects in and where other things we may have are. Cause I can kind of picture it, kind of not. But I think we can come up with some comments for the Board of Selectmen, but I don't think it's gonna end up being a priority land.
Okay. So I'll
and
just say email comments. I know the board. of
If
Selectmen
that's all right with
will look
everybody
at it.
else, I'd.
What
So
do they-
just email
What's that?
comments?
When do they need comments by?
Yeah, when is their next meeting?
I can look that up quickly. Your next meeting.
How much are the back taxes?
I don't know.
I think
what
you
the
said
tax
it's
is.
just up for
It's
5
5
years, right?
Yeah, and I forget, I mean, there's a
So taxes
significant
are like-
tax savings for
So
putting it into
you
the-
have at least a week,
Okay,
if not more, but they don't have anything scheduled for this week.
wonder how much
Just
taxes?
feel like if you do put a house on this, I mean, it's not,
Yeah,
it's still gonna have rural character, you're still gonna have open space for,
Depending on what's built there.
Yes, yeah.
True.
Right.
It's very true.
How big?
No, I'll throw a lot of,
but
our
it's
open.
2.5 acres is quite a bit.
Yeah, especially when it's contiguous, it's usually one of those, rather than it's just not an isolated spot here and there, it's
Exactly.
like, oh, if we can connect in, but it's hard
I
to
mean,
connect to the
it's
trail
still-
systems.
any floodplain?
No, well, we could look at,
If we're completely
we have
wooded,
our-
I'd have more reservations, but the fact that it's an open
Yeah,
field
Yeah.
currently,
I was gonna say, everybody
know,
kinda
we're not
knows that corner too. which
taking
is-
a
yeah.
forest down to build a house,
It
but-
definitely does have, buffer zone, at least you'll notice on that plan, it shows the fire pond that they
Yeah.
recently,
this here,
worked on
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
and there's a
updated.
ditch right there.
So that, there's a pretty substantial wetland there that the, fire pond exists within, basically. And that would be offset across the road.
and then they'll have offsets off of the 3
Yes.
So it wouldn't be.
frontage.
Yeah, it's always good to check the open space and rec.
Yeah,
plan,
no, I
just
think that's
for,
great.
prior to to an extent you wanna grab any land, but to an extent we really should limit ourselves to what we've identified as like, no, this is something we
And
might
that's
actually
something
want,
that-
and this is,
Right.
yeah.
And that open space and rec plan is something that's like 300 pages that was
It
sent to us.
is, but there's lots of great maps
Yeah,
that
no,
show like historic
but
areas.
that was PDF'd us a couple months ago, right?
Yes, and I think it's available on the town website,
Town
to go to the
website.
Concom
It
page.
is.
I know.
Yeah.
All right,
It's also
I would
available.
agree with
Great
you.
reading too,
I would- yes,
great
I'm sure.
reading, yeah.
I would agree with you,
Okay,
Yeah, that sounds
Okay,
like a
so
good plan.
comments via email
within a week.
within a week.
Yep, good.
excellent.
So if, so for the purpose of this meeting, if it's a priority area, we would want to act definitively on right of first refusal.
Mhm.
Yes,
If it's not, then we'd be open to other things.
correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Would be my understanding.
Say that again, would you just say that one more time, what you just said?
So if it, after reviewing the open space and recreation plan, if it's within an area that's noted as a priority area, meeting criteria that's pointed out within the open space and recreation plan, we would want to act on right of first refusal, meaning we would want the option to do something or protect that land.
And if it's not,
If it's not, then whether we reach out and say, you know, it's not a priority area, but we'd like to work with you to put a seal on the property and protect it, or you can
walk away.
do what you
Yeah,
want.
yeah, we're fine with what you're proposing.
Okay, good. I understand that. I hope.
Wild Road?
So Bill will have to abstain from voting as a
Bill.
petitioner, and he is now,
A petitioner.
and you actually have to state that for the record.
So what do I
So
say?
you have to abstain
I abstain from
Jeez.
voting
from the public hearing,
in public hearing,
and you are now acting as resident.
and am now
Resident
acting
board
as a
member.
resident.
Okay.
Right.
Can I have that document back that I sent? I
Yes.
think it's the staple one. Thank you.
All right, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now hold a public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a request for determination of applicability submitted by William Payne of 119 Wilder Road regarding the proposed installation of a geothermal heat system inclusive of 2 boreholes. The public meeting to begin this evening at this point in time. What are we
Would you like
proposing
to-
to? Yeah.
map here. Essentially, I'm having a geothermal heat pump put in. And there's 2 holes that'll be drilled. If I can find that. This is the best map that I had. This is my house here, there's a intermittent stream at this point. And the 100-foot buffer tends to go right through the middle of my house. Right, this is my house, 2 boreholes will be here, the stream is down here. So for the most part, 90% of my house is within the 100-foot buffer, so I need to get permission to put 2 boreholes there for the heat pump.
And currently that is lawn.
It is lawn, it's all
That's
lawn,
awesome.
you know, up to the mill where the stream is 25 feet vegetation. It is raised up above the stream.
Where's your driveway?
So the common drive is
Okay.
here, the common drive comes down here, there's a stream crossing at this point, goes up to Walker Road, almost a half a mile.
So did they come, say, is this, just to getting out there, right? Is it just basically one thing that comes and drills?
It's all, yeah, so there's a couple of big trees right here, so they'll come down this point, down my drive, they'll come down the drive, through my yard, in there, and drill 2 holes at that point.
You're not gonna take down trees, are you?
No, they don't take down trees, they'll go over my grass.
Good.
Right, so I guess when they do that, they open up a trench like this, right, and they lay piping in like that. And this is up on a hill too, this is somewhat raised up from the rest of the yard. And then they'll drill 2 more holes at these 2 spots.
How deep?
Deep. I think it's
Yeah, it's
500
really good.
feet. Yeah, you want the exact depth?
No, I was just wondering.
It is,
It's
it's
pretty
pretty
deep,
deep,
yeah.
they talk about it here.
It's really good process too.
Yeah, it essentially makes your house really efficient, it's like free after that to heat and
Yeah.
cool your house. So he's got 515 feet
Well,
deep boreholes he has to drill.
everything down there is like 70 degrees or something like that.
It's like 45 degrees,
Yeah,
it's constant temperature, so when it comes to AC in the summertime, you just pull
Pull it up.
cold air out of the ground like that, it's like free.
That's a good idea.
And it's part of the Bolton Harbor heat smart.
I was wondering if it was one of the approved vendors that are
Where's the one?
doing all that.
Where's the wetland?
Well, pretty well.
Oh, my,
Does that
my
affect-
well,
is-
this
that
is the
doesn't
house, the well is down
So it
here.
doesn't affect that or
No,
anything.
the well's 100 more, I guess, I think it's 100 or 50 feet, whatever it is, it has to be like.
I was gonna say, does it must hit setbacks? Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah,
that
he's got
does.
that, he's got it defined in his plan that he gave here too.
How deep do they dig the trench, do you know?
The trench, it should say in there as well.
It's not very deep.
I think it's like,
It's just lawn anyway, right, Emily?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like the
Here
stop
it is right
piling
here.
soil
It
and.
says the horizontal lines will be 4 feet below grade,
Okay.
can be fused together.
Oh, the trench is for the lines, not for the boreholes.
Right.
So they come and they bore first, and then they come back and dig the trench.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they put the trench in, and they run lines between the boreholes like this, I think there's a loop that gets put in.
Got it. And then does the slope,
And he talks about that soil.
so
too,
the
I guess.
slope's going that, I'm just asking, like, do we wanna see just some,
Oh, erosion control or
erosion
something?
control,
would-
just here, you know?
Yeah, in the back end.
We would do that.
Because then it's sloping down
Towards
toward the
down.
wetlands, right? So,
so would you
Does he
want
have any-
straw wattle?
Yep, so he talks about a containment pit to hold on to the soil that he digs out, right?
so he says silt fence and hay bales should be friendly others.
Erosion control measures, silt fencing, measures.
And then, you know, just wherever they're stuck, just the erosion control should be near where they're stockpiling the soil too, just so it doesn't
Yeah,
travel
flowing.
downhill. I mean,
No, that's,
those are my only
The thoughts to add.
concerns, I guess. Not concerns, but
No, but
comments.
yeah,
I mean, it's
no,
pretty
right, yeah,
straightforward.
I agree with you, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, make sure nothing goes down to the beaver.
The beavers are way
For the
friends.
beavers, yes.
that's fine.
We know.
Rebecca, do you have thoughts? on this?
Just to clarify, if we're requesting erosion or control, what that will be. Sorry if you just, I missed it.
They said
He's
silt
got-
fence and
you
hay
mentioned,
bales,
right.
but I don't,
I mean, if you want to define it, that's fine. I think it makes sense.
so it's
So he's
like,
got-
Erosion control
there.
measures, silt fence, and hay bales to be provided by others if required by building or health department. Conservation.
would we rather silt fence and a wattle, or,
I think still consider wallet would be fine.
yeah.
Are you adding that in? Because I think you may add that.
And then any concerns about where the soil's stockpiled?
That's a
anyone?
buffer area.
Well,
Yeah, because it's all within that
I was
buffer.
gonna say, can it be stocked outside of buffer area?
Yeah.
Right, 'cause this is the buffer.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But this
Ah,
is
so
driveway.
So, yeah,
And then
Right.
this is a 4-foot deep trench, probably gonna have quite a bit of soil.
So I would say outside 75 feet from the resource area, because then you're outside of that immediate area.
That makes sense. We could actually store up in here too. This driveway's huge, it's 3 cars, you know.
but if we do with the 75 foot, that would give them the option if they wanna put it on the driveway, so long
Yeah,
as
the
they're pulling it.
driveway's
to-
gravel too, right?
Excuse me. My drugs are wearing off. Only so much take well.
You'd have more testosterone in there if you-
I don't understand.
Yes,
Just
this
couldn't go through it
house
tonight.
will not be built today.
No, yeah, the wow, is interesting.
I think the whole development, it's probably 60% of it will be built today.
or at least they
Well,
paved
back
the
in the
driveways.
eighties, they just built stuff in the wetlands, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a great
So-
development. It's
One of the
beautiful.
houses.
Are you able to sell any of that air conditioning stuff to your neighbors and get back your cost?
You'd have to trench a
We're,
lot.
we're not even proposing that today.
I solar
So-
panels.
Yeah.
And I make 3 to 4 times the energy that I use.
Oh, that's
So
excellent.
you stockpile it all summer, spring and fall, and use it during the winter.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I think it's gonna cost me maybe $100 a month to heat and cool year round.
I'll be over.
Just turn the fans.
Sounds like a sales pitch.
Is anybody here tonight?
No, I didn't know.
In the audience to comment on Wilder Road, 119 Wilder Road? I did not think so. Nope. All right. Any other questions, comments here? Nope. All right. I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for the request for determination for 119 Wilder Road.
Second.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. I'd like to make a motion that we issue a
Negative.
I'd like to make a motion that we issue a -5 determination for the request for determination of applicability for 119 Wilder Road with the following additional conditions that, that the summary of work to be followed, inclusive of silt fence and straw wattles and stockpiling outside the 70-foot buffer zone from the resource, or 75 feet from the resource area. Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's all you.
All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Alright.
That'd be quick.
Huh?
This is
Fast.
funny.
Oh, we tried to print it differently, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. it's
No, no,
okay.
you're fine, you're fine.
Had so many problems.
Are we down to just discussions now? I think we have
Sorry.
No,
About 90%
Um,
of your house.
Yeah.
That discussion.
I
I don't know why that was
Those
on my
people here,
question.
just to get.
Oh, yeah, that's a plus.
So we have forest cutting plan.
And your favorites.
House 147.
Well, yes.
I've seen these here before.
Alright.
It's getting punchy.
I'm telling you, it's been a long
Have
day.
you had cold
So did I
medicine
get
too?
You are gonna get back in a
You
second.
3 are sick? Are you sick too?
I'm like, I had like asthma at this
Oh,
point.
okay.
I was sick for a month, whatever this cold that's going around.
It's Emily's.
It's all Emily's fault.
I blame her.
Yeah, there was just,
She blames her kids.
I was the only one who got sick. No,
Okay, so
Nobody-
we have
I
received
was kicked in, I've just been coughing for weeks.
a forest cutting plan. And how a forest cutting plan works is, yes, 225 Wilder. How a forest cutting plan works is it is submitted to the regional forester, who ultimately works under the Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR, for the state, obviously. We are not only in a butter to a small extent of the forest cutting that's going on, but also it's a continued plan, in terms of long-term timber harvesting for this property. They are,
Do you have a map?
yes, sorry, I'm getting
So
that.
say you put one
I apologize, my head close to it. So, the property that abuts this would be our Four Bush Mill
I said this right.
property. It's a thin strip along Four Bush Mill Road. So it's on the Wilder side and then inland abutting our property at the rear property line. They have a plan. They are in chapter 61, which was the classification I just talked about earlier. It is a long-term plan, and this is, so we basically, once it's submitted to the state, they also have to submit it to us with the information stating what they're cutting, how they're going to enter the property, which is those cart paths you see there, and obviously, they've harvested this property before, so they're pretty substantial in terms of the paths that are back there, which is beneficial. In addition, they have to basically talk about the 1,000 board feet that they'll be removing for each type of species. In addition, their cutting standards as to how they're going to be removing and basically ultimately carrying out the harvest. We have 10 days to comment, so we're at about day 7, I believe. So that's why I said we'll just wait until the meeting versus sending it out via email. If you would like, I can just scan a copy and send it to you. But ultimately, I'll just read off the products to be harvested fairly quickly. And that is 58 board feet of white pine, 72, so I'm just gonna say all the numbers which are without measured in 1,000 board feet. So we have 58 white pine, 72 black oak, and then in total, 130 board feet, 1,000 board feet, cordwood, 155, and then chips, 400.
Tons.
So how many acres is it?
It's 12 acres, and then we have 14 acres as well. So basically, it's, if you look on that, it's separated into different plots, basically, of areas to be harvested. So there should be numbered areas.
Right.
So here it basically states the breakdown of, in each area, what they're taking and where.
And is this a new forest code, or was this the existing and we're reviewing?
So this is new. It's been effective as of, in terms of the total long-term plan, it's been effective as of March 15th, 2016. So it's typical that you have the service forester go out with you, assess your lot, assess what you have for resources, then come up with a collaborative plan between them and the homeowner, and potentially the conservation commissioner, local resources. That's not always the case though. To create a sustainable plan so you're not clear cutting. And this is not a clear cut, also known as a selective cut, which can be confused sometimes. This is specific to removing specific groups of trees at different, I guess, maturity levels, so different DBH.
So I know the trails have been marked in there,
Yes.
right? So those, you'll probably use those for pulling logs out, and the trees have all been marked too.
Yes. Yep, and they're required to do that. So
And is that land under some kind of forestry restriction at this point?
it's under chapter land specific to forest harvesting.
Okay.
Did they
That's
reforest?
okay.
So it's technically not public land. I want to just make that clear for everyone in the audience. If you receive permission to traverse over that land or have received permission in the past, that's, your private agreement and conversation, but I cannot tell anyone to go out there on their own to look. But if we would like to go out and look at this, if the commission thinks it's necessary, again, we have 2 days, or 2 or 3 days to do so, until we send in our comments. So I think it'd be beneficial, whether we see it or not, to at least send in the comments, because that's really what they're looking for. And to be completely honest, sometimes the comments don't seem to matter locally. They do matter, they don't seem to change anything. So where this one's pretty sustainable in terms of the harvest that they're proposing to do, I don't see an extreme need to go out there because they're not proposing a selective or clear cut. But again, up to the commission.
I mean, if Rebecca's comfortable, generally speaking, with a forest cutting plan, she generally has a better eye on this than I do. So I'm interested to hear others' thoughts, but I think I would be fine with it.
I'm comfortable.
Do they reforest it?
Right,
Do
so
they
this
plant-
is
Just let it-
long-term
yeah.
Yeah, so
forest
they'll,
plan,
so they top down one white pine tree, and they'll put in a couple more to grow.
They don't replant them, but they let
They
it
let it
revegetate.
Regrow.
So,
Huh?
See how they're marked already.
yeah. So how, this is a long-term versus short-term, and not to make this meeting go any longer, but I will just quickly read through. So long-term forest management plan, which is what this plan is, it's a plan management of forests to achieve one or more of the following objectives: produce immediate and maximize long-term income, enhance wildlife habitat, improve recreational opportunities, protect soil and water quality, or produce forest specialty products. So that's something that you need to have a sustaining timber harvest for, to sustain any of those outcomes. Short-term, harvest of trees with the main intention of producing short-term income with minimal consideration given to improving future forest condition, which often results in a forest dominated by poor quality and low-value species. And you don't have the great succession that we have in healthy forests. You don't have ground cover, or you'll have a lot of ground cover, and then it's just, so it's beneficial to have long-term, I guess is my point. But I will email these to everyone. I don't know.
I think you did, so.
You did.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
Okay.
Was it signed by an estate? That just seemed odd to me. Is that-
Yes,
Do
so it
remember
is
it, yeah.
signed by, the owner of the property, and they have an estate of that. So it is signed by the owner of the property, whom is the executor of
Of the
the
estate.
estate, which it states there. It's not the estate that's signing it. But I appreciate that question.
That just jumped out.
It
Yeah.
jumped out of
How
me
long
too.
has it been staying in the state so long?
100 years.
If it's in chapter land, they're still using it for that use. They haven't pulled it out because of probably the 5 years of back taxes they'll have to pay, but I don't have a good answer for that. It's a good question. So in short, comments?
I would say, I
Thoughts?
can't think of any comments offhand that I want to add. I'm
Okay.
trying to read through, you had sent it around. It's just me though.
I'm with Rebecca on this one.
I support it.
I support it.
Chop, chop.
Responsible
So, yeah.
forestry,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know?
The neighborhood really.
Okay. Okay.
What'd you say?
It's a little different than drill, maybe. drill,
Emily,
but-
can I see the plans?
Yeah.
Well, I think it- you need this.
Those are yours.
Jeff?
Jeff Scott.
I actually go to trouble of printing these things and see.
I've done so in the past. I try not to kill too many trees, but I won't.
Can I ask one quick question? What is that?
That
Department of
is the
Correction.
cemetery.
Huh?
Oh, decam.
Yeah.
That's
That
what?
used to be a prison, now on the
It's a
opposite
soccer
side of
field.
it, it's a youth,
RFK,
yes,
Yeah.
it's a youth housing
Oh.
place.
yep, on the opposite side. The decam property is just abandoned, it's basically access buildings and property for the state.
Oh.
It was used at some point.
But now it's nothing
Robert
there.
F. Kennedy Action Course, is that what it's called, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right, yeah.
it's a housing facility for, like,
Kids.
trouble.
Stuff.
yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. For kids with trouble payments,
Yeah.
more importantly,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
47 London?
Sure.
Or do we have-
So,
Go ahead.
the updates for, again, keep my phone.
Yep.
Going through my notes. 147 Long Hill Road. We had given the applicant deadlines as previously stated, and at our last meeting, that was well documented, specifically suggested by the applicant himself, and then we confirmed that these were manageable deadlines to meet, and that they thus confirmed back that they were manageable deadlines to meet, and yes, in fact, they could do that. In addition to that, the work was related to the start of and completion of the replication area. The remediation of an area where there was silt and sediment that had migrated a substantial distance from the slope on lot 5 through and into the buffer area that's jurisdictional to the commission. In addition to that, there was some debris and material that should not have been within the wetland resource areas or within the buffer zones that was requested to be removed. And then the basically preserving the plants that would be taken out during the restoration process. In short, they did not meet the deadlines. The only deadline they did meet was the attempt at remediation of the slope on lot 5. And when I say attempt, it is due to the fact that yes, they did put out the stump grindings, yes, they did pull it out of the buffer area, in terms of the silt material that had migrated into that buffer area. However, instead of removing it from site, which is sort of a gray area whether that was clarified or not, irregardless, they had put it and just pulled it back to the toe of the slope and back onto the slope. In addition, they put the stump grindings down and then the riprap that was proposed originally for this project. And upon my first site visit, I had the inkling to dig under the stump grindings to see if they had in fact done that, and that's what they had done, is just pulled it back, put new silt fence down. What I also found was the old silt fence was still buried by silt in some areas, and it wasn't removed as they should have probably done in a responsible manner of restoring both the slope and the silt fence and erosion and sediment control. So again, they did pull it out of the buffer, they did put down new erosion and silt control. So that being said, during that site visit, I sort of said, okay, they've done what we've asked, but we'll see if it's stable. They had not removed the rebar right away, as we had stated. They had not provided documentation of the contract for the restoration work. They had not provided the slips for where the fill had come from. Understandably, those slips may take time to recover in a file, but take time meaning a week or two, not beyond that. And I've brought up all those topics to the applicant. They have now since removed the rebar. They have started the replication restoration area. The contractor had contacted me and clarified he was not part of the lot 5. To be clear, he has started excavating and moving forward with the replication area as contracted. And he did send me a letter as to when he was contracted, which was to start October 1st. So it was not contracted prior, which was falsely communicated to us at the last meeting, and which basically built upon the deadlines that would be manageable under the assumption that it was already a contracted party. In addition to that, today I went out for another site visit, as it was raining, and I wanted to go out and see, at the request of some of the residents, just in terms of updating on what's been done, what hasn't been done, and the fact that we've had some substantial rain since the riprap and stump grindings were put down. And to my thought, as I would assume would have happened, the slope is not stable. There's material leaching out from underneath the riprap and over the stump grindings. My concern is that it will continue and we'll have this, it'll pool again right before the silt fence, and then it'll basically overtop the silt fence, because now you have a silt fence that's buried under sediment underneath this new silt fence. In addition to that, you have that new sediment and silt coming over the top of the stump grindings, which was supposedly going to hold this slope together and not have that occur. And it's happening in multiple locations, not just one where you can repair it and it's stable. So to me, that is not in compliance. In addition, like I said, the rebar was removed, there's still stumps within the area that needs to be removed. Also, the replication area in terms of what they're excavating is starting to look like it's supposed to, it looks like a mess. But they need to excavate that material out in order to bring in the good material. I was talking to the contractor who is contracted to do, the replication area, and I asked him, you're aware we're bringing in hydric soils because it's a wetland restoration area, and it, just from his response, it seemed to me that I need to clarify, again, with the applicant, what kind of soils need to be in place. In addition to that, it seems like they will be meeting their deadline by the end of this week in terms of having the replication area in place, planted, and relatively stable. However, the success of that will be within the next 2 years in terms of planting, so they'll have to replace plants if they don't survive. And then they'll have to restore the berm which they're using to access, which we saw in the past, so it's that stormwater berm there. In addition, they cut the tree that was laying over instead of removing the entirety of it. Again, that's something I'm gonna be reminding the applicant about. I did make a note to the individual who's doing the work, and they said they have no problem with removing it, but just double check it with the applicant, which I understand they're working under them, but that is something necessary to complete the restoration area in my eyes at this point. And then in addition to that, which ultimately is a concern with the wetland resource areas, but it is more the purview of the planning board regarding the infrastructure of the driveway. There's still substantial erosion and channeling along the edges of the driveway that's probably causing structural issues if it continues, if it hasn't already, in terms of washing out the sides of the road, and then maybe affecting underneath that top surface. So that's my review. It's not a good review of the site visit. So my question to the Conservation Commission would be, yes, they're working on the restoration area. Yes, they tried, they attempted to stabilize the slope, but it's not stable, so I consider that no longer in compliance because it's now started migrating material again. Would the commission like to initiate any sort of enforcement at this point? I would not encourage a cease and desist at this point because of the replication area status. But I think we have a few violations at this point that we could start issuing fines if the commission would like to. And basically an enforcement order stating continue the work but repair what you've lacked on doing or slacked off on not doing responsibly, so now we may have a bigger issue in the future. In addition to that, if they are not susceptible to it, I would be encouraging the commission, if they don't choose to continue the work at that point, to pull the bond.
Yeah.
But that would be something I would have, again, we have to do the enforcement first, and then we pull the bond.
Is that something we could roll into receipts for the clean fill? Is there some way we could set a hard deadline for that, saying, look, it's been X amount of time, you now have 8 more days or 6 more days, and then we start fining?
I think there should be some enforcement to start with the slope.
Yeah.
I mean, we clearly, the deadline, we had a deadline, we talked about not using stump grindings, they used stump grindings and then threw riprap on top of it, we had talked about doing a vacuum truck, and then he said it's gonna be done by hand, never talked about just pulling it up. The silk fence hasn't, I mean, there's a ton there that was just, excuse my language, like half-assed, basically. I mean, I feel like that specifically needs to be enforced, that one incident, right?
I have the same thing. I mean, you can professionally fix it. It was
It was a scramble to do it last minute, is what it seems like.
And it was done as a field edit, basically, to the original. Again, the original plans called for a retaining wall there, so we would not have this problem.
It calls for a riprap. It does, I had that
Right.
confirmed
Oh,
by
did-
the
okay.
inspector, but
But we had talked about,
regardless,
we
it
had
wasn't there and it
concerns
should
about
have
the
been
stone
right.
grindings at our last meeting. We
Right.
had talked about it eroding, we had talked about it, if it didn't erode, it would, just compost and turn into more soil
Mhm.
and erode, right? And so we had said, do what's on the drawings, and it wasn't even done well. I mean, you showed us the riprap is like just at the top of the slope too,
Right.
right? It's not,
And pulling out the failed,
Silt fence.
silt fence seems fairly standard.
Yeah,
It
and
so I think
seems
that's
like
enforceable,
you would know
that
yeah.
specific area, without question.
Other thoughts by commission members?
I'm agreeing with the authority.
Any comments? Anybody this evening want to comment on Long Hill Road? I can't remember the 147 Long Hill Road.
Hi,
Please.
me again. Lauren
If-
Silly, yes, Lauren Silly, 147 North Road. So this, but until I just heard Rebecca's report of what she saw, I was kind of feeling like, all right, he's doing something, we got it, like, hold off on fines. And now just hearing that, like, I completely agree that he should be fined. He had all the chances in the world. I fully support that. My other, I guess, kind of bigger question is, so whether you start fighting and then he pulls out of the project, or whether this person that's doing the work now makes a bigger mess than is currently the issue. In other words, when he was doing the driveway, the planning board gave back a whole bunch of bond money because he had done some of the work. Then he, in doing other stuff, made it worse and left us with a bigger mess that now we are most likely gonna have to pay for out of our pocket.
Just to clarify on that comment regarding bond releases, it won't be released until it's sufficiently in compliant with the order of conditions and the restoration area that was proposed. And like I was stating before, there's a chance if he's in compliance with the other items that the bond is also held for, then yeah, a small portion of that would be released. But it doesn't seem like that's the case. And in addition to that, the entirety of the bond will not be released for another 2 years anyways, because you have that growing period.
Right, no, I just, guess what I'm saying is, so they released bond because just like you said, they had done some of the work. Then he, after that bond had been released, dumped all these stumps and rocks on the side. Well, now if he gives up on the bond, getting the bond back from the planning board, that's gonna be on us if we don't have enough bond left to have someone remove that. So my concern is that this person that's doing the replication area is gonna make more of a mess and then make it even more expensive to fix the area. So it's up to you guys, but I just feel like where's the point where we say, you don't obviously know how to do this correctly, you messed up lot 5, all that stuff, now there's more work to be done to fix what he tried to do.
Right.
When do we just kind of say, like, you're done here, like, you've messed this up enough, now we're giving the money to someone else. I understand you have to go through the process of finding and everything, but it just feels like all trust in his work is gone. I mean, I'm honestly worried about someone else he's hired being on our property at this point, because I feel like they're just gonna mess it up more.
Sure. And I understand that. I can also say, and I don't know the contractor, so I'm always cautious when I'm having conversations with individuals. Not that there's ever a negative, not that there's always a negative situation that comes out of it, but just being cautious about both protecting the resources, and also being mindful that people don't always tell the truth. In addition to that though, speaking with this individual, because they were so concerned with noting that they were not a part of the issue that happened on lot 5 without them even knowing and just simply seeing it, they said, no, we had no part in that, that was not our work. I'm fairly, and I say fairly, leaning towards this person will get it done and accomplished. But the other side of that is, I don't know if the applicant has hired him for just the excavation or just the, well, it's not just the excavation because he'll be placing the plants afterwards as well. At least that's what he stated to me. So he'll be there for most of it. but I don't know if they'll be there for all of it. So even though we have one concerned party, it seems, which may or may not be true, I can't say that it will be 100%. There's no guarantee aside from the bond at this point. So that's why, like I said, because of what I've now seen, and again, you heard me at the last meeting, I don't find things egregious that often, but that was completely ignorant of the plans, the order of condition, and then when we requested that they restore that and they bring it up to par with the plans and order of conditions, that they basically tried to bury what had happened, literally bury what had happened. I find that even more egregious, and personally, in the board's manner, not personally being me, but per the regulations in the Wetlands Protection Act, that's offensive. And that's why I'm saying the enforcement, I would encourage the enforcement for that specific issue, because we did tell them directly in our last meeting, they made up the deadlines for these items and they weren't met. In addition to that, the commission could potentially start enforcement on the fact they didn't meet the deadlines for the restoration area. However, I wouldn't encourage it yet because they're actively working to pursue that. They've stated by the end of this week they'll have it completed.
Okay.
So by Monday, if they don't have it completed, maybe that's something the commission wants to vote on tonight, is contingent upon them finishing this week, we won't start enforcement on that specific matter.
Okay.
But on lot 5, I would certainly encourage it.
Okay. I just have one other comment. In the last meeting, you said Walter was supposed to send you the contracts, and there was a few things he was supposed to send you. One you mentioned was where the fill came from for all this. Did he send that?
No, and that's what Brian was talking about wrapping into the enforcement,
Okay.
is specifying we need those within 8-10 days. If not, that's another enforcement issue, because
Okay.
you never provided that to us.
Okay.
And then, bless you, regarding the contract, like I said, we did eventually get that, but it wasn't the truth of the matter of the situation. And again, the contractor was very much willing to provide me that information and state, you know, I'm aware of these deadlines, but I also have other jobs, so I couldn't get it in sooner than that.
Okay.
So I don't know if that answers.
No, thank you. Please. Let him have it.
Are all you people involved in this thing? Everybody that's out there?
No, there's a few different.
Painfully so,
I've
yes.
been Susan Sharma, 149 Long Hill, and we've been dealing with issues for 2 years.
I was just wondering, there seems to be more of you here
Well,
tonight.
just
We brought our
okay,
too.
yeah, so.
They just picked me up.
I understand your pain, I just was curious, that's all.
Yeah, they've dealt with it for their actual houses. That's the builder, but.
So I know that I'm Sanjay Sharma, Susan's
149.
149, who speaks for me, obviously, so. But, so you can't formulate your opinions on our opinions,
Correct.
but what you will see, or have not, or will have already seen, is a consistent track record of not being diligent, not being factual,
Correct.
and after all these years, I don't expect an epiphany, so I'm expecting the same, and the next meeting will be talking about if past history is true, much of the same.
Yes, and so just, I guess, for the audience to be aware who is here for this issue, this may not necessarily be discussed at the next meeting. If the commission says we want to pursue enforcement at this time, that means until another enforcement matter comes up, or if they say contingent upon, like I was suggesting before, those will just keep rolling. So it won't necessarily initiate another conversation until we wish to act, if we wish to act, to pull the bond. So at that time, we would come back. So it may be at the next meeting, it may be not. But I just want you to be aware of that, because once we start acting on enforcement, there's really no discussion aside from inspection updates. And to be honest, just like site visits, they don't necessarily come to the meeting. It's I type up a brief summary of what I've seen out on site, and then I send it to the Concom to say, this is where we are. They've either started to come into compliance, or we're still rolling with the enforcement at this point. Yes.
For the fines, if it does come to that,
Yep.
and he has to pay, does that come out of the bond, or is that separate?
No, so he doesn't pay out of the bond. So
Okay.
how an enforcement order works is we initiate the letter, which we've already initiated. And at this point, he's been given the deadlines, he hasn't met them to basically come into compliance to stop any enforcement order from occurring. So the commission basically is voting to say we want to pursue the fines and fees associated with that, which is $300 per day per fine. In addition to that, that is a ticket that I issue on behalf of the commission, which he then has to pay similarly to a traffic ticket, in a way. In addition to that, again, if the commission wishes to act to pull the bond, that's a separate, it has to come after the fines and fees and enforcement has already been initiated, but that's a separate matter. So when we pull that, none of those fees go to him, and none of those fees basically contribute to him paying the bond. So that's money held by the town, it's not money held by him that he can then use to pay these fines and fees. I don't know if that's clear.
Thank you, yeah.
Other comments tonight?
Will you be checking up like this week to see if they're okay?
Other thoughts from commission members?
So are we, if we're looking at enforcement on the slope, right? We had
Yeah,
said before, we're going back to the 13th. Is that still the case? Because that's when it was initiated?
So that would be something, again, and just, I would like this to be recorded and documented in terms of this part of the discussion, so, excuse me, we did say we will retroactively fine to the date of the site visit, so that's clear. My thought is the commission will need to clarify this evening if we do wish to pursue fines and fees, the violation, which is lot 5, the slope, and did it ever come back into compliance? So when it was initially done, before the material started migrating again, is that considered in compliance or not? And again, I've never stated it's in compliance. To this applicant, what I've stated is I'm glad you put something on it, we'll see how it goes. You know, there's material covered, I noticed, that was buried, what was the reasoning behind that? So it was never clarified one way or another, so that needs to be clarified this evening if we're going to pursue fines and fees. Because that would start the timeline of, do we retroactively fine, or is it just back to last Friday? And that's up to the commission.
Yeah.
On a personal level, I think it goes back to the 13th, just because the work that was done,
I agree.
first of all, didn't meet what we talked about in the meeting and didn't match the plans. The quality of work was bad.
And it's already failing within
And
a week
it's
and a half.
already failing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see that as being in compliance at all.
I think it was a half-hearted effort at best. I mean, it's already failed, like it said, it's less than a week.
Right.
And it's, it
That's
was
just
not
a
well
personal-
done or engineered or thought out to, it wasn't thought out at all. It was
And
just,
all
I'm gonna
of
do
these
something
things
quick.
have been done at the 11th hour, or, yeah, the 11th hour.
Yes, that would
The
be
11th hour.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, we had talked about these deadlines and things like that.
Well, he confirmed the deadline. We didn't even
Yes.
propose the
That's what I'm
deadline.
saying.
Deadline.
It's not
Yeah,
like,
his deadline.
it's not like they went
Yes,
out
those
there
are
the
his
next
deadlines.
day and
Yes.
started
September
remediating the
21st.
slope. It was waited until
Is
the
that
last
a
minute,
meaningful
it was
date?
not done.
Those
Yeah.
are his
Properly.
deadlines.
Those
Yeah.
are the deadlines that he
Those
gave
are
us
his
in the
dates.
last meeting, on his
So
own.
definitely go back that far. Alright.
Well, we had initially said that if things weren't in compliance, we could go all the way back to the 13th, which was the initial site visit. And my only reasoning for going all the way back there is that the work that was done on that slope wasn't in compliance, was half-hearted. I mean, failed within a few days. I mean, I
And
just
when you
don't
try to
feel
fix
like,
it, it got even worse.
and we had talked about specifically the methods used to remediate it and going by the plans, and they ended up using materials that we asked them not to use in the previous
Any
meeting.
methods you asked not to use those.
The stump grindings, were concerned about stump grindings, and they threw stump grindings down and then threw riprap on top of stump grindings.
We're still waiting for the receipt of, the,
What?
for
Oh,
certificates
where the fill
for
came
clean
from.
fill, where the fills come from. And I can't imagine when we originally requested those, but it has been a significant amount of time for any kind of reputable company to come up with those receipts.
So would you,
Still waiting on those too. Doesn't give me any reason to think that we shouldn't go back to the 13th. It's kind of where I'd be at too.
I think we're all nodding with you.
Okay.
okay, so that's what we wanna do. Do you wanna take a roll call?
We can do a roll, and this is specifically for fines associated with lot 5, right?
Violation of the material that moved,
Yeah.
So it's one violation,
$300 per day.
$300 a day
per
going back
violation.
to the 13th.
Yeah. And just before we get to that roll call vote, as Rebecca said, it's, you know, we also could do something with the restoration area, which they're in the process of doing.
Right.
Stopping that or slowing that down, probably a bad thing. I would say let them see if they can hit their deadline and finish this week, and then take it from there if it's not up to
Revisit.
standard, right?
So do you wanna make it contingent upon, so when I address this
Yeah.
letter with this enforcement action,
Yeah.
do you want me to include in it, in addition contingent upon completing the restoration work as proposed at the 9/28/18 meeting, completed by the 5th,
So Monday.
Monday inspection will be done. One way or another, some sort of
So
language
you were
saying to
there
approve it.
today, you
I was
said?
there today.
It
and
was
they were just
supposed to be
excavating.
completed last week.
But you
Correct.
think it'll be completed by
I
Friday?
was told because now he's been contracted, he was contracted to start October 1st. He has told me it's supposed to be done by the end of this week, should the applicant work with him in terms of getting material delivered. In terms of the soil and in terms of the plants. And before that soil is put in, I'm getting slips.
This is the guy that's doing the restoration of the plants.
Yes.
Right,
And,
yeah.
get rid of that tree that's falling across the
Yes.
pit or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we want it contingent upon
I'd let him finish.
completing?
Yeah, I would let him finish the test.
Yeah, let him finish work and then,
So Monday,
yeah, and go see if he finished it according to what you said.
But
okay,
I
so
think what you're-
contingent being complete by Monday, otherwise enforcement for that violation will be fined retroactively.
And who did you talk to that told you to be done by Friday of this week?
The contracted individual.
The
He felt
developer.
confident about that?
He gave the dates
He felt, so
at the
he,
meeting.
We were there.
no, not the applicant.
Oh, you're talking about the subcontractor.
The individual who
Subcontractor.
contacted me independently, but showed proof of the contracted work, with the applicant, that it was paid for, and then
Trying our
the,
best.
the contractor stated that if the material, because he's not bringing in the soil, obviously, the material that's being brought in for the restoration area, which again, I will be getting something for before it gets put in, that will need to be, or he stated that so long as that's delivered in time, so long as the plants are all on schedule, it will be done by the 5th. And as of right now, he has been told and is under the understanding that everything is on time and has already been scheduled. But per the track record, not too confident in that, but I'm willing to
Right.
let the week play out.
Right.
So it
That's
gives him
my
3
opinion, but-
days to finish this. You think he can do that in 3 days?
That's what his idea is, he said that.
No,
The
I know, but is it
excavation is
reasonable?
basically done for the restoration area, so long as he has the material lined up to go, and the correct material lined up to go in, it's probably 2 days worth of work, if not a day.
So you're saying that if it's not completed by Monday, then there's enforcement on
Correct.
that aspect,
Correct.
And that's a separate enforcement from,
separate
Not
A
enforcement.
separate violation, yes.
How many total violations were there?
So, that's, in terms of jurisdictional areas specific to the Conservation Commission, I would have to go back and specifically review the order of conditions, but the outstanding ones are lot 5, so the slope that migrated into the buffer area, in addition to that stable element, the restoration area, and then, the slips. But the slips, it depends what it says in the order of conditions. I know we request clean fill, it depends what the language is within that. So I'll be going back within the next week and or two to really count out and specify what issues with the order of conditions that were given, or if they're more extensive, or they are just contained with the ones we've already noticed.
So the debris and stuff that was on the property doesn't count as a.
Some of it does, so if it's within the wetlands resource area, which at the crossing it was, and then within buffer zone areas definitively it
Right.
would be, which, so that tree across the basin, the piece of plastic from the outlet to one of the basins, that as well would all have to be removed.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how many violations he's already, even if you give him the end of the week, how many is he already in violation of because of other stuff?
Yep.
That's what I was just trying to- Okay.
Just that you were gonna review for the film what we had said about slips in the original order of conditions. That said, is it best I leave that off this for now, right?
I would,
Cause we can always
we can always add
start
that in.
enforcement, and you can always just do.
Yep.
Alright. So then, by roll call vote, yea being that the commission member believes we should start start the enforcement project for lot 5 off of Long Hill Road.
Yep.
As well as the wetland restoration project for the driveway of 147, what is it? I'm sorry.
Common driveway off of 147.
The common driveway off of 147 Long Hill Road, contingent upon restoration work being completed by October.
It's the 5th.
Fifth is Friday.
Yep, so the 5th, October 5th.
Well, we'll say 6th, give them all day Friday, right? They have till midnight,
Are you
till
going,
October 6th.
what is it, Monday you're gonna look?
Yeah.
And I would say a yay vote means we should do an enforcement order and start our fines as we've discussed, and nay would be we should not. Does this make sense?
But we're not doing fines on the restoration just yet.
Contingent upon it being.
It being
completed.
And if it's not done by Monday, when do we go back to? For that restoration area?
I say we
Does that go
start
back to
For
Monday.
the restoration area, I would start,
When he said he was gonna
I
have it
would
done?
start the original, so the confirmed date as of 9/28.
Which was
2018.
he was supposed to have it done by
Right.
9/28,
Yep, right,
so we'd go back to there.
yes.
But he was really supposed to have it done like a year ago. I mean,
Yes.
Right.
So you could go back
Yes.
to the 13th.
We could, the only thing with that is because the commission never did anything, or never said, you need to get this started. I mean, and I can look back through the minutes and double check that, but because that never occurred, it's difficult to do that. It's not saying we can't do that, but we're also trying to protect, the town and you as well, so it doesn't leave it undone.
Yeah.
But I do understand that, and I will look through the minutes to see if it ever had been brought up, because if it has, then we can bring it back to that date.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just gonna do a basic roll vote, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And again, a yay would mean that you believe we should start enforcement, A on lot 5, and then on the restoration work contingent upon it being completed by Monday or completed by the end of the 6th. Right? Alright, Bill Payne.
Yay.
Alright, Kim.
Yay.
Alright, Emily.
Yay.
Jeffrey.
Yay.
And unanimous yay as well, please.
Okay. So I'll issue that letter tomorrow.
Thank you.
And to be clear, it's not a cease and desist, it's a repair and
Right.
come into compliance.
Yes.
For CPA.
Yep.
Alright.
Also really, really quick,
Yes.
Those two
Huh?
months
That's your vice principal. Taking the food right out of your mouth.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll bring the vitamin C next time.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
I'll get sick now. Between me and Emily. Yeah. Yeah, it's only a matter of time.
You're just opening up your immune system.
We'll say. 15 minutes of discussion.
Yep, regarding ZBA.
Okay, so I know most of you here are for the 40B Still River Commons because, and to clarify, we did already talk about this, but we're gonna give you 15 minutes for any questions. It has, and I'm just gonna do a quick summary. So, as most of you know, it has not been formally submitted to Concom yet. This discussion, and the reason why it's a discussion, not a public hearing, is because it's not filed with the commission, there's no ANRAD, ORAD, RDA, or notice of intent, so no permit for wetlands as of yet regarding the new 40B development. Zoning Board of Appeals has requested comments from both the Planning Board, Conservation Commission. I've already sent initial comments, very quick, well, they're 2 pages of comments, but basically a first overview look of these are the thoughts, these are things that the commission will need clarified regarding Regulation Wetlands Protection Act items. And in addition to that, that's what we're looking at. So we're not really getting into any of the more formal review process in terms of what they're proposing where, because it doesn't seem that they have that solidified yet. They have a general sense for sure, so they've presented those comprehensive plans to the ZBA, which is being reviewed. I went to the ZBA meeting and I was present, so I'm aware of much of the discussion that occurred there. In addition, Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program did, just like noted at the ZBA meeting, do an informal review, meaning they sent in for the applicant for the 40B project sent in to, again, informally look at the project and say, is this going to be a similar situation of a no-take or it will be a take? And they said, so long as basically you're staying within the same limit of work, it may in fact be still a no-take, and that's established by Natural Heritage. They did not give a formal review, and it still needs to go through NISA filing, it still needs a formal review. If you have questions about how they determine things, I advise you to call Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program. Their information's available online to get more specific about how they establish that. In addition, DEP has not reviewed this yet. So we still are waiting for comments back from them. When they the applicant formally submits a document for an application for basically a wetland permit, so notice of intent would be the next step for them, or an ORAD to establish resource areas. The DEP will at the same time be submitted that documentation, and they will review, just like I'm sure you realize the ones who have been here longer this evening, some of the DEP file numbers, when they come back, they have comments and some don't. This project, I would strongly be, well, I'd be very surprised if they didn't have comments, I'll say it that way. So they will definitely have somewhat of comments to help guide us through the process. Some of my immediate comments, I guess, were related to the way a project was permitted in the past, showing a perennial stream, now it's showing an intermittent stream, and that has been brought up to them as well, so they are starting to look into that prior to submitting. In addition, there's a break in where the intermittent stream channel is established, whether it's perennial or intermittent. It was just interesting where that break had occurred, so I just basically asked what the reasoning was behind it. Can we take a better look at that? In addition, you know, reminding them that they have to do a MISA filing, reminding them they still have to file with DEP, even though they're a single-family home previously approved. All these assessments still need to be done because this is a completely new type of development on the site. and a completely new extent of work, obviously, an impervious area, all that. And again, first look, so we're not getting into the comparison of those two areas, but that will certainly be a question they will have to answer when they come before us formally. In addition to that, I had a question regarding, basically, I guess the ultimate question in front of ZBA is, do they waive the local wetlands bylaw? In a perfect world, they wouldn't waive any local bylaws, but that's not typical for a 40B. So what I've been doing, and I haven't come up with all of my documentation or comments to share with them to say, this is why we should or shouldn't waive the local bylaw. That's something I've been looking into and continue to look into as this process has started. And we'll bring up at the next meetings as they sort of go, whether it's before Concom or the ZBA. Something else to note in terms of summary of process, the ZBA, even if the ZBA, again, hypothetical, so I'm not trying to get, I know this is a very high tension project. Even if the ZBA approves the project for some reason in whatever format it ends up being in or design it ends up being, Concom, if it's within the regulations and it's practical to deny it, they still have the right to deny it, or vice versa. So say for some reason Concom approves it, ZBA doesn't, the project still wouldn't occur. But they would appeal to Mass Housing and various other organizations that I'm sure you're aware of that process as well, as people seem to be reading up, which is great. But just so everyone's clear, that one can't happen without the other, and it's two separate processes, but we're sharing comments with one another and trying to stay on top of, I guess, what the ZBA's concerns are, and in addition, sharing with them the immediate concerns of the resource area, wildlife there, the fact that natural heritage has obviously a large interest in this area as well, and its adjacency to the area of environmental critical concern, which is on the opposite side of Still River Road. The last thing I will mention, and I apologize, I'm sort of taking up the time here, but the last thing I will mention is I did reach out to Mass Fish and Wildlife, excuse me, to inquire, and more in general, but specifically for this property as well, what evidence and what data needs to support a cold water fishery. I know to some extent in general what needs to be there, but what actually are they looking at when they're doing surveys? What causes them to go out and look at an area to see and establish if it is a cold water fishery? So I've reached out, contacted the person in charge of that. They have, specific to the area that basically runs, which was previously permitted as a perennial stream, and assessed that area, and that will be done in 2019. And I have it confirmed that it will be on that survey list. So this spring, just for everyone's knowledge.
So is that a general survey that will be done? Or
A general
for
survey.
specific for just
This
that
is
one
for
block?
specifically just so it's called Corey, I think. It does have a name, which I was unaware of. And it runs from Still River down under the culvert through wetlands, yes, that do have beaver activity, as they have noted that wetland does. But there's still a defined channel, so it runs from Still River through the wetland, under Still River Road through the culvert. There's a substantial culvert there, and then around the rear of this lot that they're proposing the 40B, and that previously the single family home was permitted on, and then it runs towards the back of the Picarello property and then continues off. So what we're looking at is basically from the Picarello property to Still River, and having that area surveyed to see if it's supportive of a cold water fishery, and if it's not, what is there. I don't know if the commission has anything to add.
No, I was gonna say, the big thing is, and Rebecca said we talked a little bit about this earlier, and basically what we talked about is what Rebecca was saying, that they're looking to get comment from us And we're definitely not signing off on anything. Everything would still come in front of us, but it's just us gathering comments, and we had basically discussed that this week we're gonna all try to email our individually what our comments are. A number of us have had a chance to go out there on the site. A number of us have been doing some extra reading on all sorts of good things. And that we're gonna be sending her comments this week. So that said, we would love to hear your comments or anything that you would like to see us included, us to include in our comments to her. But if it's things that have already been brought up to the various boards, don't feel like you need to reiterate this evening. If you'd like to reiterate, please do. But as Rebecca said, we are going to try to somewhat limit debate tonight because I know this can be a large topic. But if anybody would like to give their comments or anything you'd like to have us to include in our comments to the other boards, if you could just state your name and please give us a few, raise your hand and yeah,
Also,
which one?
if you have a lengthy comment and you don't feel you have the time to get out tonight, I know some of you have already emailed me some comments, please feel free to do that as well. If they're jurisdictional to the commission or natural resources, send them along.
All that said, yeah, any comments?
You knew I was gonna.
Yeah.
Please.
Sasha Downey, 366 Still River Road. Just a question for clarification. The name of the study that's going to be done in the spring of 2019?
I can send you I'll send you the little blurb that I got in response back, but basically it's the cold water fishery biologist or cold water fisheries review biologist has stated that it will be on the survey list for 2019 to survey,
Oh, okay.
I believe it's Corey Brook. So I can send you that little bit of, so if you were at ZBA, that's what he was bringing up, both regarding natural heritage and, which he left out about that survey, but that was on the same meeting.
Okay, so.
But I can forward
There's
that.
no work could start then before that survey's done, but.
Well, no work can start before it gets approved by Concom. So it
Is
doesn't,
your approval contingent on this survey being done?
I can't say without anything before us, but I can say we'll certainly be considering resources on the property.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is, specific to, I was gonna ask a question anyway about surveys, about whether or not it would be, appropriate to ask for the, consideration of the vernal pool potentially on the back side of that property. I know there was indicator species found back there, and certainly, there's the question of whether there's an intermittent or a perennial stream back there. So while we're looking back there,
Yeah.
Does it make sense to look at vernal pool certification if it's a viable location?
Always.
Regarding the resource areas, yes. We don't have an ORAD, so an order of resource area delineation for this specific lot. So in terms of resource area, they're not locked in per this development, so that will be something that I would certainly encourage the commission to look at within this process, but also I have heard that they may be filing an ANRAD to look at the resource area as well.
They being the developer?
So the developer, so they come forward, do a delineation, present it to the commission, we go out, either have a third party review or confirm it if it's straightforward. And then they come back with a notice of intent based on that
Got it.
order of resource area delineation.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments tonight, please?
Robin Picarello, 305 Long Hill Road. I've been through this, obviously, building a house there last year, and I know the property very well. It is not an intermittent stream. It flows constantly, and if you're out there in the rain, it's like a little river. And we don't even know where it comes from, or it comes this way from Still River Road into the property, meets up with the flowing behind the barn and the neighboring property, and then flows out. There's culverts back there above the property. It's just saturated all the time, very wet in the meadow area as well. And Stacia has recorded the turtle sightings. We've seen them 3 times, the Blandings turtles. There's numerous amounts of animals that come and go through the property all the time. For us, we worked well with the board, and we tried at one point to save a big old oak tree, but couldn't move the house because it was too close, and we
Yes.
were okay with that. what they're asking for with all the waivers, all the infiltration systems, everything. If it's already wet on top, you're going to see some things happen on top, but who knows what's going to be happening underground?
Right.
And where everything else will spread. I mean, when you walk our property, and feel free to come anytime, and you see that it just goes this way and that way, and it's just bodies of water places, not just the running
Right.
through, you know? I mean, I just think it's, I mean, they talked about a lot of things, I have a lot to say about it, so I will email more. But they talk about a lot of things, like they're suggesting that families won't be there. I mean, you're talking about this little cluster, and saying that, oh, there's only 2 people gonna live here. I mean, you're potentially talking about up to 30 people living there with 24 cars.
Right, even if you limit it to, so when they did bring up that argument at the ZBA,
Yeah.
I was thinking, oh, you limit the age, but again, I don't know how that plays into will you be development overall. Even if you are to limit the age, you still have visitors, you have kids that visit you, whether you're grandparents or single or not.
Right, and how are they going to prevent people from going out into the meadow? And how are you going to, even with the retaining walls, all the boulders and
That's
stuff, how are the turtles going to even migrate through all that? And, I mean, one of the things that was pertaining to this, I mean, this whole acreage of land is all considered the endangered species habitats of animals and plants. It's not just one area, it's the whole area.
So, and just to clarify on that, because I had an inquiry on a different property about how, what does Natural Heritage come out and look at a property, and I'm sure some of you have called and asked that same question. The overlay is to say, this is where, not necessarily where the habitat definitively exists, but it could potentially exist, and that's where they are. In this circumstance, though, yes, you're right, we have newly confirmed, species there using the property, so it is confirmed habitat.
And then also they, you know, it's just, oh, we're gonna take a little here, a little there, it all kind of adds up. And the flood zone, that's working outside of where they're supposed to be working, the flood containment. And when they talk about the vacant land on the opposing side of them, it's not vacant, it's unusable. It was declared unusable when the original owner wanted to sell it. It's just all about all the time, and I mean, my husband was at I believe it was I'm not sure if it was the planning board, but I believe it was. And, you know, when they talk, I'm a little frazzled, so.
That's okay.
Everyone usually doesn't come to this, so I'm trying to just check my notes, but, there was discussion about the trees that were taken down on Mr. Pace's other development. And there were fines and stuff, and there's deceased, and he blamed it on Brandon, and then there was a cease and desist order, and he still cut down trees. And my husband wanted precedent on this is what could happen. I mean, you can replant trees, but what if their infiltration system goes? What if all this drainage and culverts, everything they plant goes? How is that going to affect the whole area? It's not just replanting trees, it's digging, I mean, the infiltration system is under the driveway.
Right.
If that goes, they have to dig up the whole driveway.
Yep.
And I don't even know how they're going to have everything inside the barrier to build this development. My property, I had a single home, and we had to keep everything inside. You've got mounds of topsoil, mounds of this, all the trucks. I mean, I have a lot to say. I mean, we really enjoyed having our home there, and I just would not want it to see the surrounding area ruined, or it would just be a detriment, I believe, to the whole area.
Just to piggyback off of what John was saying, 2 points for the board that you might want to consider. They did come up at the planning board meeting last week. One was the footprint, the area that's going to be disturbed. Mr. Pace wasn't too clear, and the meeting just got posted, so I have to go back and look. It may be clearer if I actually watch the meeting back. But as to whether or not it is the original footprint, it's only an acre or so. Is it different?
It is. So where the retaining wall is, it's at least 5 feet further towards the, I'm gonna call it the crossing side of that tributary of Still River. So
Well, that's because the flood's
if you're
involved.
facing the parcel from Still River Road, it's to your left. So that's where that retaining wall is going. So it's about 5 feet out within the BLSF. So the bordering land subject to flooding. So they'll have to do some work to restore that. If
Right,
it's
they're
approved,
taking that
if
area,
it
so
were
they have to
approved as
recreate
is.
it somewhere.
Right.
But also just, there was this discussion about how if you're going bigger than an acre of disturbance, that you're then flagging a different set of rules or
Correct.
different. And so, there's a question as to what that number is. Was it an acre, was it an acre and a quarter?
Yeah.
There were a couple numbers thrown around, so you probably just wanna make sure.
Yes,
It's
and I
exactly,
know-
you're going exactly what it is.
Yeah, I
Um,
know the town planner is also concerned with that because her and I went out on a site visit with their, third party review, I guess you could call it. Which was a great, site visit and just information seeking, but in addition, that was something they brought up was just looking at the area and the limit of work and looking at, okay, it's gonna come out this far here, what does that trigger, when does it trigger, so I know the town planner and the third party was going to make comments on that.
Thank you. So to your point about the trees,
Mm-hmm.
with a record of some mishaps. And in that, there is, as you guys well know, and I heard you debate multiple times, and I'm very heartened by what you had to say and your concern for when things go wrong with development, which they do, subcontractors make mistakes, whatever. Is it appropriate for the Conservation Commission to recommend to the ZBA that if this project moves forward, that somebody from, I don't know if it's DEP or from conservation somewhere, at the state level, oversees this project, more so than you guys, because you can only go out on the property so many
Yeah.
times, you can only see the silt fences buried so many times. Like, is there somebody that, so that before the tree gets taken down, or before the infiltration system leaks into the wetlands and over to the aquifer across the road, you know, is it a reasonable request, I guess, to say we want somebody watching to make sure this is done well?
So in general, the order of conditions that the commission issued, part of our issues on a regular basis, part of our boilerplate is to have a wetland scientist, that they have to meet certain criteria and it's specified within that condition, to review the project. I don't know what happened on that lot. I don't know if planning board has similar situations, but again, they're not out there 24/7, but
Exactly.
they may be out every
Working.
day. And it is reasonable to make that request, but in terms of having someone from DEP there, I'd really have to seek input from them. I know they don't have the manpower to be out there
Yeah.
every day. I don't know if because of the type of development, maybe it sets a precedence, I don't know. But that would be something I'd have to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you. Annalisa Dante, I live at 378 Still River Road. I understand waivers for the increase in density regarding 40B projects, but I don't quite understand a waiver relative to wetlands. I've lived there 32 years. This property, before it was divided up, was a cattle ranch. And I will tell you, the cattle never stood where they want to build these houses because it's that wet at that end of the property. Okay, never happened. And my real concern is with this developer, they talked about the piece of land that was, the portion of the parcel that they were, they got a permit to build a house on, single-family house on. Now they have divided this into 2 lots, and I posed the question at the ZBA meeting, and we got a pause, and then we got a very slippery response about this streamlines a particular process for them to be able to do things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do. It's a developer that we now know has, made mistakes or has not complied with the law, basically. And so I think that there isn't a level of trust that there really ought to be when we permit somebody to do these things. So I just really want that to be considered, because I think trust is really an important issue here.
So personally, I would agree with you regarding taking, and I think it is important to take into consideration in that circumstance where they're blatantly ignoring something that was required of them. That would be something we would need to seek counsel on if, in a formal review process, could we consider something like that, as for the developer's past actions. But that would be something I need to look on the legal aspects of, but certainly important.
To consider.
Oh yeah, definitely.
couple.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Raising his hand.
Either or, yeah, go ahead, I know you've been
You keep
waiting
raising
patiently,
your
go ahead.
hand, so.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, if you want, sir, and then I promise I'll give you a chance.
Bob Martell, 302 Long Hill. Rebecca, I just wanted to ask if you were able to share my letter with the rest of the,
Which one? I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be,
the one I drafted after the ZBA meeting.
I have not yet, but I will forward that to them.
Most of my comments are in there, so I won't go into detail, but
Mhm.
you know, there's several comments some of the folks have already mentioned. One of my concerns with DEP, and I believe there's a 180-day process right from the time the first ZBA meeting starts to when they have to,
For the 40B process?
to
Yes.
issue some kind of decision on it.
For just the ZBA,
Right.
not necessarily Concom.
Okay, so does that apply to like DEP and?
To my understanding, yes, and I can double check on that for you,
Okay.
but it's a separate process to my understanding.
Okay, because obviously this would be an ideal time of the year for both them and, potentially Visa to get out there and see the property.
Yes.
Less so in November, December, which, at the rate we're going might be when they wind up asking those bodies to come up for a review.
Sure.
I wanted to mention too, traffic. Somebody mentioned the number of cars that are potentially gonna be there, and, if we're concerned about wildlife in the area and the turtle crossings and such. I think it was estimated that there might be, 40 to 45 trips a day in the ZBA meeting,
Yeah.
going in and out of that property. Unlike the Picarillo's property, you're almost entirely, 340 degrees surrounded by wetlands here, right? So the animals don't know half of the road, right? So, almost certainly they're gonna be traversing across this area that will be the access point to this. And another concern I have is noise, and the impact that will have on development. And to that end, as well as other concerns that I have regarding that, if there's any request for weekend construction, I would be strongly opposed to that, because just to give one more day of quiet, the rate we're going, construction might wind up starting in the spring, and that's probably gonna be the worst time for, a lot of these animals who would be, looking to come into that area. Landscaping plan, there's something mentioned in the ZBA about that, I think that's pertinent at the end of the day, that we preserve any, drive-by sight lines to the property and, replanting so that, these 30, 40-foot high buildings don't seem so out of character if the project does go through. From a pollution standpoint, there is a pollution prevention plan that's been submitted, but still I have concerns about enforcement of fertilizers and herbicides and mosquito spraying and that kind of thing that might wind up, being proposed, again, should the project go through, as well as snow storage areas and their impact. Where are they gonna pile up the snow, and when it starts to melt and run off, what's that gonna do to any drainage? And I think somebody else mentioned two recreational areas. If there are children in the area, and I believe there will be, just because there's 2-bedroom homes. I was at a point in my life where I was a single parent living with my child.
It's not uncommon, yeah.
So it's not uncommon, and, if there's not accommodations for them to gather, they're gonna likely wind up disturbing and blighting the wetlands areas. Those are the more salient points that I had in my letter, and again, if you could share that with the rest of the,
Yeah, I will forward
members
that
of the
tomorrow.
commission, I appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a comment?
Thanks. Pat Westwater, John, Idle Lane. A couple of questions. One, about water. We have a lot of concerns for people who are having trouble with water in Bolton, and I just don't know if the area can supply enough water to that many people in that small an area. And two, around the area of trust, going back with this, I'm curious how this happens. This person bought this piece of property and was informed at the time of sale that this was a parcel for one house, and that the rest of the land was undevelopable because of wetlands.
Yes.
So right away, that raises flags for me, that this person was well informed that this is the situation, and yet bought this land intending to put 19 bedrooms, this many, outrageous. And then couple that with the fact that the person who's taking down the trees on this other property that they're developing was told that you're not allowed to take down these trees, took down these trees anyway, and said, oops, that was a mistake. Is another reason not to trust that this person is acting in good faith, that this person, that these people obey the law, respect the law and the community here in Bolton. So I just wanted to put that.
I'd like to expand upon that comment too. You know, one thing I started looking at early on in the application was just, who is this application for? And it appears that Mr. David Russell is the one who's applying for the project, and his name is mentioned throughout. I didn't see one mention in there of Bob Pace, yet he seems to be, you know, the one we're talking mostly about here, and indeed he identified himself in the ZBA meeting as being associated with this project.
So he is in a combined LLC with David Russell. So they're both of their names are on the project. And like I said, it hasn't been formally submitted to Concom yet, but at that time, if, you know, we'll clarify who the applicant is, and typically within the narrative or within documentation supplementing that, it may be one's the property owner and one's the developer, or vice versa, or they're partnering within the LLC, and in this, I don't know if there's another situation where one's owning and one's developing, like that, but I do know they're both part of the LLC.
The Stormwater LLC.
Correct.
So the land is actually in the name of a different LLC, and
Yes.
that appears to be only.
So that, the Turn Left LLC, that's Bob Pace.
It's actually David Russell on the Commonwealth's website anyway.
And I appreciate that information. When it comes before Concom, we'll clarify that as far as how it's filed with us, to specify the individuals involved.
It's probably legal, but my thinking is that if you have someone who has shown sort of blatant disrespect for this situation here in the past, I don't know what their profit margin is, but if they go about cutting trees and they're fined, but that they can eat that fine, pay that fine, it doesn't really affect their profit margin much. I just wish there were a way to say, you know what, if you disregard the regulations, you just don't get to build here, and you lose your permit.
Yes.
Should be not just, okay, we have to pay a few $100 fine or something.
So I can certainly say we have the enforcement in place for that reason, obviously, as you're aware, but I do understand that concern. And that's why I stated I'm gonna seek some guidance on if we can make any decisions based on that in contribution to other things we're considering, or if it's simply we just have to keep an eye on it, or request more third-party reviews. There are other, or bonds to be held in place. So there are different resources that we can pull at to use to ensure, or to better ensure compliance. But you're right, that is something I'll be looking into.
And finally, I have to say, I am so impressed with your parent level of investigation and research and taking this
I'm
so
trying.
seriously. Thank you very much for,
No problem.
this is a volunteer, right?
No, I actually work for the town. They are volunteer, but they actually do put a lot of effort into it as well.
You know, since you're doing it, and other people doing it, they were volunteer, but, thank you. Thank
Not a
you.
volunteer, but Rebecca does go above and
Right,
beyond
thank
more
you.
often than we would like to,
Everybody
yes.
else to also feel.
Was there another comment in the back? Yeah, please,
Yes,
please.
yes.
Go ahead.
I'm Sandy Ignatz. I live on the other side of town, 19 East End Road. And I just want to piggyback off of your comment, which is this, I've lived here for 40 years, and I have not been to very many meetings, Conservation Commission meetings, but I am encouraged by the vitality of this board and your.
Yeah.
That's what we're all happy
We're all saying we're probably I'm the only healthy one here.
And I'm
Soon.
encouraged, I'm truly encouraged about this project, that you will watch it closely, or maybe not even allow it to happen. Because I really, I love 40B notion. The notion of 40B is very good.
Yep.
Not on this piece of property.
Right.
There's lots of property in Bolton. Pick another piece.
I agree.
That's
There-
it.
Cannot
Go ahead.
comment, but-
I
And
just
we
have
are-
a few more things, just because of the things
Sure, and this might be our last
That's
comment of the
good.
night, and again, this will come before us, we have lots of time to comment on these, but go ahead, please.
And I don't understand the laws of the 40B so much to say, but I know there's LLC here, LLC there, and I know there's a certain amount of money that this 40B project that allows the developer to make off of it. I don't know if it's 20% or something.
Yeah.
So who's to say they're not coming in as one LLC and some, coming in as another? I mean, David Russell's name came up with tons of LLCs issued with him, and I don't know how it all works, but, if you come in buying one that's turned left LLC and then it states David Russell, and now it's still River Development or still River Commons, it's kind of known a lot of different ways, but I'm not really, I don't know the law about that, but I just want to make that comment.
Are they
But
Bolton
just-
residents?
No.
No.
Well, one
tons.
I thought was,
Yeah.
but no, the short answer is I don't believe either of them.
But as Bob said, I was going to reiterate about the fertilizer, the snow removal, what they put down for ice prevention, it's gonna all seep into the rainwater coming off the roofs. And where's that gonna end up? And there was discussion about people going into the wetlands to try to access the trails behind all the properties back there.
Which I'm a little
There is
confused,
no
because there aren't
access.
trails
It's
back
all-
there.
Oh, there is.
Well, further
In the
back,
open
yes.
field,
Yeah.
yes. But there's no way that they can access it through that property unless they
No.
build a bridge. I mean, it's just ridiculous how,
Do we have waiters?
it's
Yeah.
crazy. The only other comment I wanted to make was something about a mention of the fire department and getting clearance through them, and if they could use Harvard's water. And someone else I had heard said, and I'm not gonna quote it, but someone else said something about, well, if you can't get Harvard water, where are you gonna get the water from when you have to install tanks? Well, where would they install those in all this? And then maybe a sprinkler system in the house? I don't know. So I just think this is, again, Joe and I are for 40Bs as well, but we just do not have access to the right location for this kind of project. And it was permitted and applied for and as a single-family home in that area with lots of restrictions. When we purchased the property, the restrictions came with the property for a single-family home. And that's the way we believe it should stay.
No, thank you all, appreciate everybody staying on top of this and commenting, and couldn't do as many things as you can, really good. How are we, can we push everything else off?
What's the address of that property, if you were gonna just go?
Which one?
So you need to notify you can do it from the road, you need to notify the developer if you're going on the property.
But just for viewing it from the road.
It's right before you get to Harvard, like, it's literally the last lot before you get to Harvard.
Right.
On the right, it's on the right-hand side, as you go towards Harvard, if that makes sense.
Right, you can see the raised.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask one more question.
No, I just wanna reiterate that if you need to come on the property, I mean, I have videos of that where Steve and
Say it,
everything like that. And
yeah.
we have, knowledge of the property, so feel free to come and look.
How big is the plot? How many acres?
It's on the right-hand side.
It's on the right-hand side.
I think it's 6 acres, they're only proposing under 2, it's like 1 point something to be developed. They said under an acre, but it's more than an acre.
Of that 1.2, how much is resource area?
Well, how much of the 6 is resource area?
Yeah,
Question is what to ask.
of the 6.
The 1.2 is basically the 5 feet extending beyond it, and then in addition, the, like the floodplain area at the back. So there's a slight extension in terms of, I think they're proposing rocks or like the runoff, and then addressing any runoff to be infiltrated or redirected. If it's going to the rear, that would be a disturbance area as well. So it's those areas. So it's probably an acre of impervious surface, but then you have the septics, and then you have, it's not an acre of resource area.
So to get, they're proposing the size of the development they want, they have to use the whole 6 acres, you're saying, right?
No, so the housing that they want, they limited it to under 2 acres.
And it's high rise, like
They're tall.
Bolton high rise,
Bolton
you
high
say
rise,
it's a multi-story,
Yeah, I think
Tower
they said
building.
3 floors.
2 stories, 3 stories?
3-story
oh, 3 stories?
is what they're proposing, yeah. Yeah.
But then if you have that much impervious surface too, now you've got retention ponds, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they have,
I mean, you have to.
yeah, I was gonna say, it's a big,
She blew my mind with a 24 car comment.
well, yeah, when you start thinking about how many.
I'm just trying to understand how you can take a piece of property that was zoned for a single family residence and how is,
You can propose.
I don't understand.
You can propose whatever you'd like to propose.
Decisions. Because it has not been formally before us, but, so this is what we're looking at.
And this is the 100-foot buffer.
So, explaining the resources, so we have this. No, you
No.
can't. That would be violation.
I know,
Yes,
Meeting
yeah.
I'm
on
sorry,
that.
I'm sorry.
So everything, I'm gonna say the opposite, so everything outside of this, or beyond the blue line this way, is within the buffer. This is what's outside of the buffer resource area. What I was talking about, the 200-foot riverfront area ends about here. But the cutoff that I was talking about is, I'll show you, I think we have it on a
Ends
different map.
here and goes out to Still River somewhere?
So this is the perennial stream that they've now claimed intermittent. So Still River Road is here, the perennial stream comes this way and around. But my concern is the riverfront area here, but the channel, yeah, so here's the break. The channel, when you look from the road, from my observations, without really following this channel, but I did in the spring, but this is all well defined. Channel, bank, bed. Over here, it is wetland, but there is a channel running through it. There may be two channels running through it. When you look from the road, the main area bends this way and then that way. So my thought is there may be an impact of a riverfront area to, so now you're showing the riverfront area here. Here's your break. When you stand here, it looks like it comes this way though. So now your riverfront area, instead of being here, would be here. Which may not have any issues, but it may also have issues, so that's something that needs to be clarified.
This is the only part that they actually is in the buffer.
Right. But
No,
even
this is the only part that's
outside
outside.
of it, but even part of this is probably cut off, right?
Yeah, it's actually right where that,
Right,
it
so
comes this way.
technically there, up to there, is outside.
So that's what we're looking
That's why it's a single family house on 6 acres.
Yeah.
at. Right.
Well, single family house would be, Vaughn Hill Road, that's,
Yes, so that they had the corner, if you, the woman who was talking earlier, we kind of conditioned their house.
yeah.
We were going out there, the
Here's
barn
the
way in the
same
back,
thing.
so they're on that corner
This is
of
the
Vernal.
retaining wall.
And this would be,
The vernal pool she was talking about is back here somewhere, there's a low point, and it pools, there was a wood frog, but at an adult stage, so you would need to find empty egg casings or, tadpoles or something.
all the good things, MACC meetings, history, need to fall asleep tonight, awesome.
Well, I've read that one about 3 times. This one I went through a whole course for.
I think I took the math course on that. No,
Yeah.
I think it's really good.
So you buy those on that, did you get those on?
This is
on the
another
website?
retaining wall.
Yep, so that's for the septic. So I don't know if that's necessarily a retaining wall or just a wall for the septic. I don't know what you classify that as.
Do you recall, too, and this might be a discussion from now, they were correct, that somebody was saying they wanted to split it into 2 lots for streamlining purposes. Which, you know.
I don't know what that would streamline.
Yeah, and that's why I wasn't sure, because it was one of those, it doesn't, to an extent, doesn't make sense, but it almost doesn't make sense so much that it's probably done for a good reason.
Well,
But I
good
could be
reason,
wrong.
meaning it most likely won't trigger certain regulations,
Yeah.
not relative to us.
Where are they gonna put the single family home in this thing, right here?
Right here,
No, it was gonna be here. Yeah, it was gonna be here.
it's like here, and septic are in the same area.
So we go from a single family home to like 200 people.
It's ridiculous.
It's a huge.
Huge impact.
So
to
this
the-
is available in my
It's a really
office,
minor
is
area.
if, before you wanna make comments, you wanna come in and take a look.
And we will get Rebecca those comments this week, hopefully.
Yep.
Do you have
What
anything
time are you
else?
tomorrow? 8 o'clock? 8:30? Oh, it's kinda late.
We got-
No, we can do it tomorrow, we can do it today.
9 to 2:30.
I can do it
I
tomorrow.
didn't say till 3. Just shoot me an email
Are you planning to
Or
go
I
out
might
there
call you.
tomorrow?
or call me.
Are you planning to go out there tomorrow?
I was gonna talk to her about the maps.
Oh, about the maps.
Okay.
I can't understand how somebody can try to put a development.
Are you talking about the overlay maps?
The maps you have right
Oh,
now.
those.
Just come in at like 8:30.
Bring coffee, cause it always helps to bring coffee.
No.
It does.
No,
I
that's-
bring my coffee at home, thank you.
It's just, it always helps to bring
Most of the
donuts or coffee for.
Donuts and coffee. It's a great combo.
That was my dinner tonight.
And just, just
Nothing pressing? And
as a
we have-
sign,
Go ahead.
we signed the contract for Fleischer, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that is gonna get,
Well, no, the contractor is signing it, providing us back, filing for a building permit. Don has to sign it, the accountant has to sign it, then we're good to go, so within the next 2
well,
weeks.
yeah, okay.
That's for the work at 5 Star, you said?
Correct.
Yeah,
Or the
and
entrance?
the other thing, but it has to do with the tax committee, is that we were planning on over at Power Springs, because the driveway is getting worse and worse. I went and talked to, Rebecca and I were gonna go out there and plant some signs, but when I went over there today to look at it, it's like concrete. So it's a little difficult to dig holes to put poles in. So I stopped at the DPW and asked them if they had an auger.
Yeah.
They don't have one, of course, you know. But Joe, is that his name, Joe?
Yep.
Joe said he has a contact with New England Power Grid, what's the name of New England Grid?
Power company.
Power Company,
National
well, the
Grid.
Power Grid, National Grid, or whatever, and he's gonna get a couple of telephone poles and stick them on.
Oh.
I think the key, he said if somebody drives over a telephone pole, he'll know about it. So he's working on that, so I just thought, I wanted to bring that up,
Yeah,
just
No,
to make sure
appreciate it.
that's going on. And, I guess that's about, I mean, we don't have to worry about the trail maps or anything else like that, you don't
No,
want to talk
so
about that?
to note, just quickly, we don't need to have a conversation about it. The trail maps, the Bolton Trails Committee website has been retired. And temporarily, the maps are being housed on the conservation page of the town website. And then, the Bolton Trails Committee and their members will be determining where it will be permanently housed within the next few weeks or month. And then we'll send out a notice of where that will be, but you can download them online still, just it's on the conservation page of the town website.
So if anybody would like to come to the Trails Committee meetings, we have the first Monday of every month in this same room. So if you'd like to come to the Trails Committee
What time?
meeting.
7 o'clock?
Yeah, they won't
Time's
last,
over.
believe me,
They
the
don't
guys
have
are
like
older.
9:30.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't get over at 11
If those are
o'clock.
well, we're
And I don't think
pushing
anybody
it.
was
We're pushing
sneezing
it.
or coughing or whatever.
All right, do we have anything else outstanding?
No.
All right, Emily Winter, top 10 Bolton themed Halloween costumes for this year, what do we got?
I don't have any.
All right, in that case,
Sad.
I'd like to make a motion that we officially close the October 2nd, 2018.
So do we want to dress up for Halloween?
Bolton Conservation
Bolton
Commission.
Committee for.
Maybe.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.